The Hall of the Wood by Scott Marlowe. Part 2. Chapter 9. Skave and Nohr. "How long we going to sit here?" Nohr asked for the umpteenth time as he gnawed his way through yet another piece of tree bark. Half-eaten specimens, gray with disease, lay piled at his feet. Inhaling deeply, he spat out the latest to grace his mouth with a curse. "Tastes stale." Skave rolled his eyes, for he'd listened to that very same conclusion more times than he cared to remember over the course of the morning. Now, as the day wore into early afternoon, he fought a losing battle trying to contain his irritation. "How long?" Skave, glaring at the Gaugath from his side of the log, finally conceded victory to his temper. "We'll sit here until I say otherwise." Nohr bared his fangs, but made no move to challenge Skave's authority. Instead, he went back to gnawing on his bark. Skave knew Nohr didn't want to be here. The Gaugath had made that clear from the very start. But his lord, their lord, had so ordered it. The two of them, unwilling to disobey a goblin known the Underland over as the meat peddler because of the manner in which he sliced off and then pretended to sell portions of his victims, had selected a small contingent of goblins to accompany them into the forest and to the home of their longtime enemy. The witch herself had prompted this expedition. Come up from the Simmaron, she had traversed the tangled forest of grey woods surrounding their fortress, and at its very gates, requested an audience with the peddler himself. Graal had granted it, listening as she made her bold claim of having driven the king's patrol from the forest by way of her skullduggery. Lord Graal knew if the woman spoke truthfully, then here lay an opportunity there was no ignoring. Skave, Nohr, and the others had traveled into the Simmaron at the peddler's behest, their task to verify the witch's claims. At the hall, Skave was surprised when they found it deserted. Convinced of the witch's claims and relishing this stroke of luck, Skave had dispatched his goblins back to Greth to inform Lord Graal of what they had seen. Skave had buried his own hatchet in the hall's door as a warning of his intention to return. Visions of himself at the forefront of the advancing army had sprung to life and waned just as quickly, for he next remembered the other orders given to him and Nohr. The two goblins were to put themselves at the witch's disposal until such time as Lord Graal arrived with his army. The peddler, seeing a powerful ally in the witch, wished to keep up relations with her and to demonstrate his own importance to their arrangement. Skave cared little for Graal's political maneuvering, but he'd also known the day to defy the goblin lord was not that one. He'd call Graal lord for the time being, but only for as long as it took to fulfill his own objective. Long had Skave desired to see the people of the Simmaron driven from the forest and, more importantly, the patrollers broken, beaten, and slain, bereft of their lives and their precious hall once and for all. While the witch's magic may have already stolen the patrollers from him, Homewood and the hall itself still remained. Skave planned to tear down the latter piece by piece. Then, with the host of Greth at his back, Homewood would fall, its people taken back to Greth as food and slaves. Skave's gloved hand absent-mindedly went to the scar zigzagging across one cheek. He almost wished a patroller had left the mark to better feed his vindictive nature. But no, one of Skave's own kind was responsible for this particular reminder of his bravado and overzealousness. Skave's wagging tongue had started the fight. His adversary's knife carving into Skave's face had ended it. In between, Skave had made his boast to bring the patrollers to their knees. Single-handedly, no less. He was young and stupid, and the other stalker had laughed at him, telling him he'd never survive an encounter with a patroller, let alone slay one. They fought. Skave lost. Leaving Skave defeated and humiliated, the other had turned his back and walked off as if Skave's presence was no longer of any consequence. Skave had made a pledge then and there to destroy the patrollers and, even more gratifying, to flaunt the accomplishment before his rival right before driving a knife into his gut. A short while after that fateful day, Skave began slipping into the Simmaron, evading the much-vaunted vigilance of the patrollers with ease. Skave was a stalker, a master of subterfuge, stealth, and skulking. Trained in the dank subterranean halls of Deep Hollow, the stalker refuge buried in the depthless dark of the Underland, Skave was one of their best. Over time, he became so skilled at evading the patrollers' watchful eyes, he moved about the Simmaron at will. Just a few years before, Skave had even ventured undetected to the very doorstep of the hall. Never once had he regretted his bravado when he had risked all for that one glimpse of the place. Nor had he regretted it more recently when he had explained to the peddler himself how he was ready to do it again. Of course, Skave had not been aware the Lord of Greth planned on ordering him to do just that. "I'm hungry," Nohr stated. Skave, interrupted from his thoughts, threw up his hands in frustration. "What must a goblin do to get some peace and quiet around you?" "I care not for peace and quiet," Nohr said. "I say we go do something." "Oh, really? What do you want to do?" "Find this knight and bash her puny head in." Nohr smacked a clawed fist into his open palm as he let out a deep chuckle which shook his body so hard it sent vibrations into the log. Nohr was huge, even for a Gaugath. At just under 8.5 feet tall, with a massive chest and broad shoulders to match, his stride alone set the ground shaking. His roar caused lesser men to drop their weapons and flee the battlefield. Coarse, brown fur, whose lightened tips gave the Gaugath a grizzled look, provided enough protection from the elements for Nohr to wear only leather hides even in the coldest of caverns. His eyes were strong and dark. His ears, large and pointed except one had its top torn off. A maw ringed with yellow, jagged teeth was set beneath a black nose and narrowed slits. Leaning against the log was his massive warhammer, a dreadful weapon the Gaugath warrior had only recently renamed Night Crusher. Lord Graal had summoned Nohr from Desolation Peak, where his mountain tribe laired, commanding him to take part in this venture because of his reputation as a formidable warrior and because, in his younger days, he alone had fought an entire patroller squad and survived to tell the tale. Despite being past middle age now, Nohr remained amongst the strongest of his tribe. Before, while still behind Greth's walls, Nohr had expressed his displeasure with their assigned mission. The Gaugath considered himself too old for such adventures. "Too comfortable," Skave had replied. Nohr denied it, but Skave knew it was true. The Gaugath had left the mantle of warrior behind long ago to become, of all things, a brewmaster. Mead was a staple of all goblin diets, and of Gaugath's in particular. Nohr had inherited his family's renowned brewing recipe years before and, capitalizing on its popularity, gained much favor and reward from his own tribe as well as from neighboring ones. The only reason he had been coaxed from his home at all was because the brewing season had drawn to a close, and all which remained was to trade the last kegs for those necessities his family and fellow tribe members might still need before beginning their winter hibernation. Nohr had handed those last duties to his mate prior to his departure. Tradition, however, dictated the last few casks remain reserved for the brewmaster, his family, and those tribe mates considered closest. Nohr didn't trust his own family to save any of those last ones for him, and so the only plausible thing to do, or so Nohr had reasoned, was to strap one of those last precious kegs to his back. Now, the half-empty Gaugath-sized keg, of which Nohr partook of several times a day, lay near him on the ground. The barrel was dark and weathered, but none the worse for wear. "Find the knight and bash her head in," Skave said, repeating his comrade's words with a mocking tone. "Why don't you then?" "Huh? Why don't I what?" "Go find the knight, bash her head in. Then, when the witch's spies return to her—" "Spies?" Nohr's head spun all around. "I see no spies. And tell how you defied her by going after the intruders before her devils had their way with the girl." Skave looked the Gaugath up and down. "You're so big, I doubt she has jars large enough for your organs." "No matter. She can cut them up and boil them in a stew. She ought to get several weeks of eating out of you." Nohr swallowed hard, then shook his head. "I'll not become witch food. I'm staying here." He looked around again and whispered, "I still see no spies." "Trust me, they're there. Why do you think we've been sitting here for so long?" Skave took up his sword, a short, broad-bladed weapon, and waved it in front of him. "I've half a mind to go stick the little Greckle rodents, but it's not worth the effort. They'll grow bored soon enough and leave, and then we'll be on our way." "On our way to where?" Skave sighed. "To find the knight, but especially the patroller." Nohr chuckled. "You're going to crush his head." Skave smirked. "Something like that. But what about the witch? She won't like it if she finds out we killed them before the devils." "To hell with the witch and her man-eaters. By the time she learns of anything, Lord Graal and his army will occupy the Simmaron, and that filthy crone can scurry back to whatever hole she crawled from." Skave grinned, and soon both goblins laughed and spoke of the slaughter to come as they waited for the witch's spies to wander off. Skave was right. Her minions grew restless in short time. Once Skave had scouted the area just to make sure, the two gathered their things and, with Nohr hefting his beer keg onto his back, set out for the hall. Chapter 10. Taken. Murick watched Holly dab at Jerrick's wound with a damp cloth. As she ran it across the patroller's forehead, he stirred, half opening groggy eyes. "What was that thing?" the patroller whispered, his voice gone dry and hoarse. Jerrick tried to rise, but the effort proved too much as he fell back onto his makeshift bed. Looking from Holly to Murick, he started to question them, but the words faded as his raw throat seized up. Murick handed a water skin to Holly. "Help him drink." When Jerrick had drunk his fill, Holly tried to make him comfortable. Ash, sitting at Holly's side, barked once. Jerrick winced as he held a hand to one ear. "See, he sleeps," Murick said. Though the poison was gone from Jerrick's system, drawn forth by the sorcerer's magic, Jerrick still needed rest. Murick made sure he got it, hovering over him until he saw the patroller's eyelids droop and then finally close. Satisfied, he said to Holly, "I shall venture outside to see if Kara has found anything." As he walked from the great room, he encountered Kara coming up the porch steps. "I found nothing," she said, her armor looking dull and shabby in the afternoon gray. She still carried the gray-hafted hatchet they had removed from the hall's door. They hoped Jerrick might shed some light on its presence once he recovered. Murick nodded, already looking past her, his white eyes fixing on the forest beyond. "Perhaps I shall have better luck." Walking past Kara without further comment, he used his staff as support for his crippled leg as he headed into the surrounding woods. Murick cast neither detection dweomers nor any spells, though, for the Esslar was quite certain Jerrick's attacker was gone. He considered telling Kara as much, but for now, it was best the knight and the others believed he knew as little as they about Jerrick's encounter, the missing patrollers, and the corruption of the forest. Now, more than ever, they looked for answers. If they thought him privy to secret knowledge, the Esslar might find himself surrounded by suspicions he neither wanted nor needed. In truth, much still baffled him. The mystery of the missing patrollers remained such, as did the exact cause of the forest's deterioration, but the sorcerer felt comfortable in his ability to trace all of it back to one commonality: Ceres. The witch's name had haunted Murick for over 30 years now. It had been that long since her betrayal had been realized and thwarted. Their relationship had always been one of convenience. She had possessed knowledge and an understanding of processes of which he had been ignorant. In exchange, he'd offered her secrets of his own. It seemed a fair trade in Murick's mind, and might have been so if Ceres had not purposely fed him incantations and eldritch knowledge which had almost gotten him killed. At first, he'd wanted vengeance. But as the years had passed, such desires had fallen by the wayside, For Murik's purpose was not driven by such things. His was the thirst for knowledge. Power as well, but he'd no ambitions beyond mastering a long-forgotten magic or discovering a bit of eldritch teaching. That Ceres had denied him, this did more than anything else to fuel the forces which drove him. He'd given her truth. At one time, he had wanted no more or less in return. Except now, it was too late for bargaining or fair trade. He'd take what she should have given him all those many years ago and kill her if she tried to deny him. He'd probably kill her anyway. He might have no need for vengeance, but she did. Better to end it than to spend the remainder of his life looking over his shoulder. The others needed to know nothing of this. He'd no desire to see them harmed. It was not beyond possibility they might solve the riddle of the missing patrollers, as well as the corruption of the forest without ever having to face the witch. Alone, he'd return to his task of finding and destroying the crone. Murik looked upon the forest's decay and wondered about that. While such a task had never been trivial, it had always lain firmly in the realm of the possible. But now it seemed the witch's power had increased beyond anything imagined or anticipated. How else could she have sent an entire forest on a slow but steady march unto death? That both troubled and intrigued him more than anything. Ceres had always been a powerful witch, but this spoke of something else. Something here, in the forest. Something that had kept her rooted in place long enough for Murik to catch up to her. This wasn't the first time he'd done so. Other times, she'd discovered him and fled. One time, they'd fought. His crippled legs served as reminder of that particular confrontation. But Murik believed in new possibilities. Even now, some previously unknown element may have tipped the scales back in his favor. Murik hoped so, for he saw nothing around him but decay, death, and the triumph of his enemy. Jerrick drifted in and out of sleep most of the afternoon. While he did so, the others worked at bolting or blocking all of the great room's entryways so only the main doors remained unobstructed. The hall was larger than any of them had anticipated. Given the increasingly late hour and mindful of the possibility Jerrick's attacker might return, they decided to postpone a more thorough inspection of the place until morning. Still, they couldn't help but look around for any immediate signs of what had happened here. A cursory examination told them no one had called the Hall of the Wood home for some time. Second-floor bedrooms looked as if their last occupants had risen from slumber, thrown sheets and blankets aside, and never returned. The surviving oil lamps were empty of fuel, their keys turned up all the way, as if left burning until exhaustion. The kitchen, which was just a short distance from the great room, had not been used in weeks, if not months. Cupboard doors were flung open, the shelves mostly barren. What little scraps of food they found were either stale or rotten. Dusty counters were covered with a mismatch of earthen jars, iron skillets, and pans, some of which were caked with rotting, half-cooked food. In the great room, they found empty packs, a few traveling cloaks, pieces of armor, and even an assortment of weapons, presumably left behind by the others who had answered Homewood's call of heroes. Outside, Kara discovered clotheslines on which shirts, gowns, pants, and socks still hung. Behind the hall, she found the stables and a series of work areas, including those of the blacksmith, leather tanner, and furrier. Though the shops were devoid of life, there was evidence in each of projects started but left incomplete. The stables themselves were empty, but for one donkey Kara found standing quiet and subdued in the dark. It looked famished, and she provided the poor animal with what hay she found as well as oats from their own supplies. She also introduced him to Orem and Russ. The donkey's spirits lifted just for the company. Holly and Kara had gathered an ample supply of wood earlier, and a comfortable blaze in the great room's hearth provided the travelers with light and much-needed warmth as night arrived. The pungent smell of burning wood pushed away the room's cool staleness, as the flames cast long, dancing shadows upon the walls. Jerrick, feeling better, woke long enough to pick at some food. While he did, Kara requested he provide them an accounting, even a brief one, of what had happened. Jerrick obliged, providing a slow but detailed retelling of his arrival at the hall. When Kara held the gray wood hatchet up, Jerrick explained what it meant. He went on, detailing his encounter with his wild-eyed assailant, but offering only a vague description of it before he drifted off to sleep once more. The others used what remained of the evening to plan their next course of action. A more thorough search of the hall was their first order of business come morning. One of the missing patrollers or someone else may have left behind some written clue, a journal or diary perhaps, telling of their fate. In the meantime, however, they remained vigilant in case Jerrick's assailant decided to return. They each took a watch. Murick volunteered for the first, with Kara and then Holly taking the next. Though the knight was confident the chamber was secure, Murick took the extra precaution of casting a dweomer to alert him should anything enter. With that, the Eslar bid them all good night before he moved off to find a chair to sit in until his watch was concluded. The Gatherer Spider watched all of this from one corner of the great room. Only when afternoon had turned to night and the dark-skinned one slept did the spider stir to life, leaving its perch to scurry upside down along a ceiling beam. Its multi-ocular vision focused upon only the one as it positioned itself directly above him. Then the Gatherer lowered itself from the end of its web line. When it hung suspended just above him, it severed its tie to the silky strand and plopped down onto the man's clothing. The spider's prey felt nothing as it scurried up and down and across his shirt, moving to his waist and then to his shoulder before it spotted the single follicle of hair. Picking its way to it, the Gatherer's mandibles latched onto the errant strand. The spider wasted no time effecting a getaway, returning to the rope of webbing and pulling itself back up to the ceiling with its prize. From there, it was nothing to return to the outside where the Gatherer headed straight for a series of webs connecting the hall to a nearby tree's branches. It scurried across the web and onto one particular branch, stopping when it came face to face with a Greckle who sat picking at the fur on his belly in silence. Speck saw the spider and grinned. "What tidings, little one?" the goblin asked, emulating the greeting of his mistress. The spider held the single piece of hair out to the Greckle, whose chin curled and ears perked at the sight of it. "Ah, little one," he said, "you have done well." He took the hair from the spider's mandibles and, holding it tightly between forefinger and thumb, inspected it with one of his slanted yellow eyes. A spindly tail peeked over his shoulder to curl about the strand. His fingers released their grip, and both hair and tail disappeared behind his back. "Now for your reward." Speck reached for the small pouch at his side, but then stopped as a new idea popped into his head. Why give the Gatherer its due when he could smash the puny thing and keep the reward for himself? Speck grinned as he envisioned his fist landing on the spider's body, its pus-like innards splattering across the branch and oozing out from beneath his hand. Something in his eyes must have warned the Gatherer Spider, for it started backing away from the Greckle. Speck suppressed a screech of glee as he moved to head off the small creature. "Don't leave yet, little one. Your reward awaits you." But then Speck remembered something. Months ago, his own mistress had also wanted to smash him after he had accidentally knocked over her special potion. Though she drove Speck out of her house, hissing all the while about how long it had taken her to gather the exact ingredients in the exact quantities, and how she now had to begin the process all over again, she had not killed him. Speck knew he had been spared only because of the invaluable service he provided her. In the same way, the Gatherer Spider provided its own dutiful service. Speck decided to follow his mistress's example. He'd not kill this spider after all. Speck's three-fingered hand grabbed at the drawstrings of his pouch. Reaching in, he fumbled around inside it for a moment. Then his hand emerged. Enclosed in his balled-up grasp was a mass of black, twitching flies. He spread the winged insects out on the branch, then licked his hand clean of those which had stuck there. The Greckle smacked his lips. Delicious! As he backed away, the spider moved in, packaging bunches of the flies into web sacks, which it then attached to its abdomen with sticky web strands. A powerful arachnid despite its small size, The gatherer had the strength to carry many of the fly sacks back to its home. Yes, yes, Speck said as he hopped up and down. Take all you can carry. That was our deal, little one. Speck snatched up one of the flies and plopped it into his mouth. He chewed for a moment, then swallowed. They're only stunned and will wake just in time for your feasting. Speck, aware of the sleeping enemies nearby, suppressed an urge to clap. How he desired to be there when the spider sucked the life from each and every one of these poor, helpless insects. But his mistress had other chores for him to perform, and he needed to hurry back to her. Tell all your spider friends about Speck. Speck wasn't sure the gatherer had any friends, but he went on anyway. You tell them Speck honors his bargains, and that Speck always has tasks in need of performing. You tell them that. Speck sat back against the tree and watched as the spider gathered the last fly sack, fastened it to its abdomen, then scurried away. Well, not even a goodbye. Speck's face took on a look of feigned disappointment. Then his lips curled back to reveal yellow, jagged teeth, and he bounced forward on gangly limbs to lick the last of the remaining flies from the branch. Delicious, he said again. Then, with the sorcerer's hair securely held in the grip of his slender tail, Speck went poof and reappeared on the ground. He immediately set out in search of his mistress. Pain. White hot, it lanced through Kara as if she burned. Her armor offered no protection. The metal was molten steel, searing the flesh from her bones as it cast her mind into pure agony. Her lungs heaved, desperate for air, but the motion only fueled the flames further and the pain increased. Looking down the length of her torso, her mouth opened in a silent scream, for where her stomach had been was now a great gaping rent, oozing red blood and pink guts. Kara woke with a start, sitting up and groping at her stomach with both hands to feel for the wound which wasn't there. Surprise and relief flooded her mind all at once as she realized it had only been a nightmare. Kara leaned back and closed her eyes. It had all seemed so real. The battlefield soaked red with blood, the agonized neighing of felled horses, the screams of the maimed and dying littering the ground in broken heaps of armor and flesh. She had been the last knight standing, ringed in by a horde of screaming, taunting goblins. One came too close, and she had disemboweled him. That kept the rest at bay until their leader, a brutish ogre whose bared chest was crisscrossed with scars, plowed his way through their ranks, his nightmarish battle-axe held before him. Without so much as a challenge, he batted Kara's shield aside and knocked her to the ground. Kara screamed for quarter just before the brute buried his axe in her. But it had only been a dream. She was safe. The knight opened her eyes again at the sound of Ash's whining. Following the dog's stare, she saw one of the great doors open. Then she noticed Holly's absence. Kara threw her blanket aside and rose, shouting at the others. Wake up! Jerrick mumbled something, then rolled over and continued sleeping. Ash, who lay at his side, looked intent on staying there. Only Murik heeded her. Holly's gone. Kara grabbed her sword, whipping the blade free from its sheath. She tossed the scabbard aside as, barefoot and clad only in a loose tunic and leggings, she ran across the chamber toward the open door. She stopped outside at the topmost of the porch steps, scanning the night for her friend. She saw nothing but gray mist and darkness. The night air was cool, and she suppressed a shiver. Behind her, she heard Murik's staff tapping on the floor. Where did she go? He asked. I don't know. Where in Barathrum did she go, and why did she leave without saying anything? Kara balled her free hand into a fist and, with her other, clenched the hilt of her sword so hard her hand throbbed as the blood fought its way through the constriction. I woke, and she wasn't there. Damn this fog. Murik brushed past her, picking his way down the steps and into the gray mist. Kara followed, the damp earth cold on her bare feet. Once they had walked a good 30 paces, Murik stopped. Lifting his staff to the sky, he willed his magic to life. His staff flared into white brilliance as it lit up the clearing from the hall all the way to the tree line. Much to Kara's surprise, the magical light penetrated the mist, revealing all. They spotted Holly immediately. She stood with her back to them, just at the edge of the trees. She was not alone, for a smattering of yellow eyes burning in the night's darkness looked back at them. There was a moment of shocked surprise. Then Kara acted. There was no time for fear, no time to strategize. The knight shouted to her friend and, brandishing her sword, ran toward her. Holly paid her no heed as ragged hands reached out from the darkness to take hold and draw her into the trees. The bard made no move to resist. In moments, as Kara looked on in frustration, Holly was gone. Then, one by one, the yellow eyes blinked out until none remained. Holly! Kara plunged into the woods after her. There was no immediate trace of her, nor was there any sign of the yellow-eyed fiends which had taken her. Kara ran headlong in the direction Holly had faced, flying by trees which, at times, she avoided only by scant inches. Murik's light vanished behind her. Kara knew the crippled sorcerer could not maintain her pace. The knight bit her lip and ignored the sharp twigs and thorns stinging her bare feet, running until her breathing became ragged and she felt as if her lungs might burst. She continued to call out to her friend as she ran, though her voice grew less and less audible as exhaustion steadily overcame her. Finally, unable to run any farther, she stopped, her chest heaving as she took in great gasps of air. Looking in all directions, she saw nothing but the dead and dying Simmaron oaks standing amidst the cursed mist. But for Kara's breathing, the forest was silent. The knight let out a cry of frustration as she sank to her knees. Tears welled in her eyes, and she felt as if she might be sick. Holly was gone, taken right from under her nose. Kara beat the ground with her fist, anger and frustration overwhelming her as the tears, no longer held in check, streamed down her cheeks. Kara sat like that for a few seconds, but only for a few. She blinked away the tears, wiping them from her cheeks. Refusing to surrender to despair, she beat back a rising tide of emotions. She took a deep breath and centered herself. Under her breath, she muttered the words which bound all knights: courage, truth, honor. The three merits. They were Kara's foundation. Everything she did, everything she had learned, stemmed from their principles. They provided the knight with guidance and strength. Adherence to their values separated the knight from the knave, the chivalrous from the scoundrel, the true soldier fighting for duke and fiefdom from the mercenary fighting only for money and greed. Kara felt she hung over a precipice, her hands clinging to a rope that dangled over the edge. If she let go, if she succumbed to her anguish, it meant Holly's death. She refused to let that happen. Wiping away the last of her tears, she pushed herself from the ground. She had sworn to keep Holly safe. A lack of resolve or courage or inaction was not acceptable. Not to her, not to the others, and certainly not to Holly, who needed Kara now more than ever. Kara's honor, the last and most important of the three merits, demanded she put forth every effort to find and protect her charge, even if it meant searching behind every tree and under every leaf. Blinking away the last of her tears, Kara set off back toward the hall. Her search might take hours, days, or even weeks, but no matter what it took, she'd find and save Holly. As she emerged from the forest, she discovered Murik standing where she'd left him. "Holly's gone," Kara said. She passed Murik without stopping, climbing the porch steps where Jerrick, half-dressed with his cloak wrapped around him, stood. Ash, his ears perked and head cocked to one side, was next to him. The patroller leaned against the door for support. "What happened?" he asked. He sounded better than before, but still weak. Kara said nothing right away, brushing past him as she headed straight for her belongings. As she started to don her armor, she explained what had occurred. She made no mention of her emotional episode. "How did they get to her?" Jerrick asked. Kara shook her head. She didn't know. The main door was open when I awoke. She placed her hauberk over her shoulders, letting the bottom of the chain shirt fall to her thighs. It was locked from the inside, though, and there was no sign of forced entry. Murik stepped into the room, the light from his staff still glowing but subdued. My spell did not alert me to anyone entering the room. Holly must have gone to them. "Why would she do that?" Kara asked. Murik didn't answer right away. His brow narrowed in concentration. "She was entranced. There is no other explanation. We both saw how easily she went to them. Jerrick, do you know of any creature in the Simmaron to possess such power of suggestion?" Jerrick thought for a moment but shook his head. "So," Kara said, "they have some sort of magic." "It seems so," Murik said. Jerrick looked at the knight. "You saw nothing else of the creatures but their eyes?" "No," Kara said, fastening pauldrons and vambraces to her shoulders and arms. "Nothing." "If the eyes are any indication," Jerrick said, "they must be the same thing which attacked me. I never considered there might be more of them." Jerrick threw his cloak aside. "I'm coming with you." Though his steps were unsteady, he reached his things and started to dress. "You won't find her." Murik's voice caused both of them to stop. Not easily, at least. Kara turned on him. Feelings of despair may have disappeared, but in their stead remained an intense anger just waiting for release. The knight had little patience for doomsayers. "Not now." "What do you mean?" "She has passed beyond my perception. If these are indeed the same creatures as the one who attacked Jerrick, there will be no trail to follow. Then we'll search every inch of the Simmaron for them." Kara returned to her armor, fastening her greaves to her legs. Murik sighed. "Where do you propose we start? It's a very large forest. Without some direction, you'll never—" "Damn it, wizard!" Kara threw the greaves to the ground, then strode right up to Murik. "Holly is my charge, and I will not just abandon her to those things. If you have something to add, something that might help, then do so. Otherwise," she said, turning her back to the wizard, "shut up." Kara busied herself with her armor again, though her mind was only half on the task. Part of her refused to accept the Eslar's words, but part wondered if he might be right. If Holly was truly lost, then so was she. "Do not blame yourself, Kara," Murik said, his voice calm. "For it is I, and I alone, who must accept the blame for Holly's abduction." Kara stopped what she was doing and looked at the sorcerer. Murik's shoulders slumped under her gaze, and he sat back down. "It was my spell which failed us this night." He sighed and shook his head. "It never occurred to me to guard against someone leaving." "Hoo-hoo!" Through the still open door flew an owl. It circled the room once, then ascended toward the ceiling to perch amidst the shadows of the latticed rafters. The owl was the first native denizen of the forest any of them had seen since departing homewood. "It's a horned owl," Jerrick said. "A great brown and gray feathered bird. It possessed the characteristic black bill, large yellow eyes, and white throat patch of its kind." "There's something—" Jerrick narrowed his gaze at it. "I think I've seen this owl before." The light given off by Murik's staff intensified as he stood and held the gnarled shaft higher. "I see nothing to distinguish this owl from any other." "I know it looks like any other horned owl," Jerrick said, "but—" Kara, who had finished with her armor, moved to stand between the two men. "Who gives a damn about an owl?" She had to tear her own stare away. After so many days without seeing any wildlife, it was odd seeing the bird. "Have you both forgotten my friend has just been taken by—" She pointed to the outside. Those things, even now, they could be doing. She didn't want to think about it. We need to go, now. She strode toward the great doors, not looking back to see if either Jerrick or Murik followed. Hold, knight, Murik said. I think the owl is trying to tell me something. Kara stopped, not sure if she had heard the sorcerer correctly. The owl is what? She took a few steps back toward them. Are you insane, wizard? Murik kept his attention on the bird. No, I am not insane. He's trying to tell me something, but he's very frightened. We need to try to get him down. That's it. I know where I've seen him before. Nohr, Jerrick called to the owl. The owl looked down, but made no other movement. Jerrick, what are you? Murik said. Nohr. The owl remained disinterested. Does anyone know how to call to a bird to make him come? Jerrick asked. Ash barked. Shut up, Ash, Jerrick said. Murik arched a brow. A horn, whistle, or even a hand gesture typically works. Murik demonstrated a sign. But I must warn you, even if this bird has been properly trained, precautions must still... Jerrick used the described gesture, calling again to the owl. This time, the great horned bird responded, leaving its perch with a hop as it spread its wings and swooped straight down at the patroller. But it came down too fast, with no perceived intention of landing on his arm. Jerrick just ducked beneath the owl's talons, stumbling from the effort and landing flat on his face. Kara was too far away to do anything, but fortunately for Jerrick, Murik was not. The Eslar wrapped his cloak about one arm, creating a makeshift perch which he held out. The owl flew straight for him, hovering for just a moment before touching down on his outstretched arm. Murik calmed the animal with soft noises as his other hand drifted closer and closer, until finally he was able to run the back of his fingers across the bird's feathered chest. Well now, Murik said, it seems he has indeed been trained. Jerrick rose, taking a few steps back from the owl. Oh, he's trained to kill. That's Nohr, all right. I wasn't sure at first, but now, his handler is Ivar, eldest of the elders, and the friend I came here to see. Jerrick scowled at the bird. Stupid owl never did like me. Murik fought to suppress a smile. Kara appeared next to Jerrick. Tell us what is going on, Murik. The Eslar held up a finger. Wait just a moment. Kara exchanged a look with Jerrick. As Nohr purred and occasionally hooted, Murik responded with clicks and low noises of his own. Finally, the Eslar turned back to the others. I know it seems strange to you, but I can communicate with Nohr. Not in exact words, of course, but I can approximate the sounds and gestures he makes and respond to him in like fashion. Still suspect, Kara asked anyway. What's he saying? That he knows where our friend has been taken. Kara's expression did not change. The owl knows where Holly is? If this is some sort of a joke. I make no jest. Kara stared at the Eslar a moment longer, then threw up her hands. Fine then. Can he take us there now? Yes. In fact, he has already offered to do so. There's more, isn't there? Jerrick asked, studying Murik's expression. What else did he say? He says Holly has gone to the same place the others were taken. The place, he says, where they went but never returned from. Which means what? Jerrick asked. What others? Does he mean the patrollers? Does he know where they are? Murik clicked a few noises at Nohr, who responded by shifting his weight from foot to foot before taking off from the sorcerer's arm. The owl flapped its wings in broad swipes, lifting itself back up to the rafters. Murik's gaze followed him up. He only repeats what I have already told you. One thing is for certain, however. Something about the place Holly and the others have been taken frightens him. The leather straps of Kara's armor creaked as she shifted from one foot to the other. If we have to follow an owl to find Holly, then that's what we'll do. We leave as soon as we can. The others nodded their agreement. As Murik went about his own preparations, Kara, concerned about Jerrick's ability to participate in Holly's rescue, asked him how he felt. "I'll manage." "Good." She made to turn away, but then paused and said, "I'm not the best with words, but I wanted to say, you know the forest the best of all of us, and your assistance is appreciated. I only want Holly back. We all let our guard down tonight. Holly's absence is all of our faults, not just yours." Kara nodded, then left the great room and headed for the stables. They set out a short while later. Once Murik had coaxed Nohr outside, the owl flew from tree to tree, stopping often to allow the three to catch up. Though a nearly full moon shone overhead, heavy fog and mist blocked most of its light. They used the illumination cast by Murik's staff instead, plodding their way through the woods and into the night. Chapter 11. The Curse of the Hall. The sound started as a murmur. Though Holly heard it, she thought it nothing more than the breeze touching the exterior of the hall. But then the murmur became a gentle whisper floating across the great room, flowing into and permeating every part of Holly's being so that, all at once, her mind and body relaxed. Her doubts were silenced, and the fear plaguing her since their departure from Homewood dissipated until nothing of it remained. How strange the voice woke no one else. Thoughts of the others vanished, leaving only the sweet sigh repeating the same simple utterance over and over. Enraptured, Holly strained to comprehend it. The moment she did, she was lost. Holly. The sound of her name sent images and sensations fleeting through her mind. She saw herself running amidst the great oaks of the Simmaron. The forest was beautiful, free of the evil taint. The dread of the past few days was gone, replaced by an exhilarating, carefree sense of freedom. Others ran with her, but they were nothing but shadows striding just beyond her range of sight. Voices called, beckoning her forth from the hall. Through the fog eclipsing her mind, she felt her feet step forward of their own volition as she meandered past those continuing to sleep and to the great doors. She undid the heavy bar latched tight across them, swung one open, then walked out into the night. The forest's mist no longer harbored shades and shadows for Holly, and she allowed it to engulf her without hesitation as she descended from the porch, moving farther from the hall toward the whispered calling of her name. She paid no heed to the damp air chilling her skin. There was only the melodic voices and the thought that, just ahead, they waited for her. When she reached the trees, she stopped. Behind her, Holly thought she heard a new voice, call her name, but the summoning ahead grew louder, drowning out all else. The clearing lit up then, and she saw the eyes. Pacifying orbs of yellow, they reminded her of candles shining in the dark. Soft hands beckoned her into the forest. Holly, welcoming their invitation, offered no resistance. Behind her, a voice cried out again, but then she was surrounded, and all else slipped away. Holly felt herself lifted up. Stars peeked through the haze above, and trees swept by on either side as she floated through the forest as if in a dream. She closed her eyes and must have slept, for when she reopened them, the hands were setting her down. Leaves rustled as her booted feet touched the earth, and the hands released her. Her own weight was too much for her. Her knees buckled and she collapsed. The ground felt hard and cold against her face. She tried to rise but didn't have the strength. None of the hands moved to help her. Holly peered into the darkness, searching for the comfort of the yellow eyes, but they were gone. The air, already cool, grew colder still until it chilled even the skin beneath her clothing. She shook involuntarily. Then, as if someone pulled away a veil, the fog lifted from her mind. In its place was a steady throbbing which caused Holly to wince in pain. She lay on her side, and she drew her knees closer as one hand went to her temple. She tried to wet her lips with her tongue, but her mouth had gone dry, her throat raw. Slowly, she pushed herself to her knees. The throbbing in her head intensified, and she almost fell back to the ground. She steadied herself, though, closing her eyes as she sat still for a moment. When the pain had lessened, she opened her eyes and, through the mist, saw the robed apparition. It stood no more than 5 paces from her, just at the edge of a ring of moonlight which illuminated the small glen Holly found herself within. All dark robes, its size dwarfed Holly's own. Its visage, buried deep within its cowl, was indiscernible, as were its hands, which were joined together within the folds of the robe's wide sleeves. Holly shrank back from the specter. Some part of her mind screamed for her to stand and run, but the best she managed was to scurry backward on all 4s. Fumbling with her mandolin, which somehow remained slung over one shoulder, she immediately butted up against something she thought at first must be a tree. Her hand recoiled when, instead of rough bark, her fingers brushed against thick hair and tight, quivering muscles. She looked up, her eyes locking on twin orbs of yellow. Whatever magic-induced comfort she had previously found in those eyes was gone. Now they instilled only horror, and she recoiled from the evil she saw in them. She lunged away from the fiend, inadvertently moving closer to the robed figure, which stood exactly as it had when Holly had first glimpsed it. Her heart leaped into her throat as she somehow managed to stand. She ran from both specter and fiend, but still weak and unsteady, slipped on a patch of wet moss and fell back to the ground. Footsteps and the rustle of robes told Holly the apparition was coming for her. She scampered forward, somehow gaining her feet again, but something whipped her legs out from underneath her and she landed flat on her back. Something cracked. Her mandolin, which she had taken up just before. How did I get here? She struggled to scream, but her breath had fled from her lungs. As she struggled to recover, coarse, powerful fingers ran through her hair, tightening about the short tresses. Sharp pain stabbed into her scalp as she was hoisted up bodily from the ground. This time, she did cry out. She hung from the specter's grasp, her feet dangling in midair while it turned her slowly one way and then the other. Another hand shot out from the black robes, and Holly glimpsed, for only a moment, mottled gray-black fingers covered in scales and tipped with claws. One of the claws scratched across Holly's forehead, and she cried out as it cut a line in her skin. She flailed and kicked at the monster holding her fast, as blood welled from the cut. Then the scale-handed creature slapped something mud-like and sticky onto her forehead, and Holly screamed in pain. It felt as if the flesh around her skull disintegrated away. The hand holding Holly prisoner at last let go, and she toppled to the ground. The burning remained, though, and thinking nothing of the damage the substance's contact might do to her bare hands, she flailed wildly at her forehead, wiping it away. Her hands remained free of pain, and soon the burning lessened from her forehead as she scraped the last of it from her palms. She collapsed to her side, tears streaming from her eyes as she lay curled up, hoping the fiends forgot her and left. "Her blood is pure," the robed being said, the voice a hiss. "You have done well, my minion." The yellow-eyed creature bowed its head in acknowledgement. "Return to your brethren," the reptilian voice said. "Leave the girl to me." Though Holly heard nothing of the beast's departure, she knew it was gone. Hot breath assailed the bard then, as clawed fingers wrapped about her throat. Holly was lifted to her feet, her chin thrust upward so she looked directly into the dark aperture of the specter's cowl. A serpent's tongue flicked out from the darkness. "Know that I am a powerful witch. To trifle with me is to risk certain death." A scaled hand grabbed hold of each of Holly's wrists and held them together while the witch bound them with a cord. Holly winced in pain as the knot was pulled tight. "My slaves have taken you far from your friends this night, but we travel farther still." The witch stepped back and drew the cord out, intent on pulling Holly along like an animal. "Who? What are you? Holly screamed at the witch, despite the rawness of her throat. What do you want with me? It was a struggle to keep from crying. Time enough for talk later, the witch said. She looked heavenward for a moment. Now, time is short. Come, we must be away. Come. She tugged on the cord, nearly jerking Holly to her knees. As the witch continued forward and the length of cord separating them grew taut once more, Holly dug her feet in and tried to hold her ground. It was a futile effort. Either the witch was too strong or Holly too weak. Left with no other choice but to follow, Holly stumbled after the witch. Together, they disappeared into the forest. Chapter 12. Patrollers of the Hall. Jerrick and the others followed Nohr for hours as he flapped his way through the dark, mist-enshrouded forest. Whenever the owl paused long enough for them to catch up, Murick traded indecipherable croons and clicks with him. Satisfied with their exchange, the sorcerer, who remained the most comfortable having Nohr as their guide, then sent the owl forward once more. Jerrick took note of every tree and rock they passed, creating a mental map of their route as they went. They had neither been led astray nor passed through the same section of forest more than once. For all of his own reservations about Nohr, it seemed the owl was leading them somewhere. Jerrick remained on the lookout for signs of either Holly's or her abductors passing. There were none, though. He found his lack of success disconcerting, for he was a skilled tracker. Only great natural ability or magic had hopes of foiling him so effectively for this long. Jerrick was still tired, though, his skills dulled. The poison might be gone from his system thanks to Murick's magic, but some of its effects still lingered. There were times when, if he moved too quickly, his head swam and he felt as if he might lose his balance. Other times, he just felt sick. He told the others nothing of these after-effects lest they think to leave him behind. Jerrick knew he shared in the blame both Kara and Murick had claimed for themselves. The truth was he felt responsible for not just Holly, but all of them. Even Murick, who was his superior in many ways, including age, wisdom, knowledge, and, as Jerrick possessed none of his own, magic. But the Simmaron was Jerrick's home. In some strange way, despite their current predicament, he felt as if he were their host. This feeling extended even more so to Holly, who he knew was the most ill-equipped of all of them. It did no good to try to lay blame at Kara's feet for bringing Holly along in the first place. The girl was in trouble, her life in danger. Jerrick was a patroller. Protecting was his business. It didn't matter that he had walked away from that life, for it remained a part of him. No such thing as an ex-patroller, many of them were fond of saying. Behind him, Aurum clopped across a series of rocks while Kara questioned Murick on their progress. The Eslar communicated the knight's inquiry to Nohr, who replied, through Murick, that they were close. But close to what? They had no idea what the fiends had planned for Holly, or how long they had to reach her. Nohr had spoken of others who had gone to their doom. Who else could the owl have referred to besides the patrollers? If Nohr's recounting, as told through Murick, held truth, Evar had also gone down this road. The eldest of the elders was the reason Jerrick had returned to the hall. Perhaps not the only reason, he mused, for Jerrick had other friends and acquaintances here he looked forward to seeing again. But Avar's counsel was, first and foremost, the reason he'd left Rel. Years ago, Avar had freed Jerrick of his duties and given him his blessing to leave the hall. Avar had been the best of friends, a father figure to him in many ways, and Jerrick had thought to return to the hall to seek out his wisdom. If somehow Avar was still alive, he swore to do everything possible to help him. Jerrick's thoughts continued to preoccupy him until Nohr swooped onto a low-hanging branch and refused to go any farther. It appears we have arrived, Murick said. Though he did his best to peer through the dark and mist, Jerrick saw nothing to distinguish this part of the forest from any other. Murik let the light from his staff fade as he thanked Nohr for his service. Nohr, making no pretense of his fright at what lay ahead, ruffled his feathers and hooted a response. Keeping his voice low, Jerrick said, "I'm going to scout ahead to see what's about. If I see either the creatures or Holly, I'll return." "I think not," Kara said. "We tried that once already, and look where it got you. I say we stay together." "I don't think—" "I must concur with Kara," Murik said. "The creatures have already demonstrated an abnormal amount of stealth and ferocity, and though we remain unsure of their exact disposition, we do know they outnumber us. We should remain together." Jerrick weighed their argument, finally shrugging his acceptance. "You'd best leave your horse behind, then. You're going to be loud enough walking around in that armor of yours." Kara hesitated as she considered the request. But then, in agreement, she dismounted, gathering her helmet and shield before giving Aurum a slight pat on the rump. The horse moved off and soon stopped. "When we find the creatures," Kara said, "Murik and I will distract them. Jerrick, you locate Holly. When you have her, signal to us and we will withdraw. This plan relies on quick execution. As the sorcerer has pointed out, we will no doubt find ourselves outnumbered." Kara looked at Jerrick. "How do you feel?" "I'm fine." Jerrick met Kara's stare for a moment. Her message was clear to him. "You had better be." "Our first and only priority," Kara said, "is Holly. Do what needs to be done to ensure her safe recovery. Murik, once we find them, we'll need light." "I shall do what I can," Murik said, "but be warned, the same light which allows us to see will shine like a beacon to our enemies." "Noted," Kara said. "Now let's go." Jerrick, bow held ready, took the lead. Ash, silent as a shadow, padded at his side. "Kara." Jerrick clenched his jaw but said nothing about the audible creaks and groans her armor made, followed with her sword in one hand and her kite shield in the other. Murik brought up the rear. Jerrick picked the best path possible, avoiding beds of dry, crinkled leaves and roots threatening to trip the more careless of them. The trees and shrubbery here were as tainted as elsewhere. The still air, heavy with fog and mist, obscured their scent. Else the first of the creatures Jerrick saw might have detected his and the other's presence immediately. As it was, the creature had no inkling they approached as it crouched low to the ground, its back to them. Almost a shadow lost in the mist. It was alone. Long, wild tufts of dark hair shot out from its head in all directions, and its back was covered in dried mud and bristled animal-like fur. Lean arms were folded at its sides. Its hands worked at something in front of it. It wore no clothes or armor, nor did it appear to possess any weapons. Thinking of the cuts on his face, Jerrick realized these creatures had no need of weapons. The others stopped behind Jerrick. Despite the noise of Kara's armor, the fiend was so preoccupied with its chore it remained unaware of their presence. Jerrick ventured a quick glance over his shoulder. Though Murik had dropped into a crouch, Kara obstinately remained standing. Murik held one arm around Ash, who seemed nervous as he sniffed at the air. Returning his attention to the creature, Jerrick pulled back his bowstring and took careful aim. Blinking away a moment of dizziness brought about by the last lingering effects of the poison, he let the arrow fly. The missile struck true, hitting the creature square in the back of the neck and sending its body to the ground with a muffled thud. Jerrick motioned for the others to follow him as he approached the felled creature. Rolling it over with his boot, he got his first good look at one of the things. It was a lanky beast with gaunt arms and legs, a thin neck, and long, narrow fingers tipped with blackened claws. Its eyes and mouth were wide open, its stiffening face reflecting the shock and surprise it must have felt when Jerrick's arrow had pierced its throat. There was a distinct, unwashed odor about the thing, and its body was covered in tufts of hair clumped together by dried mud. In one hand, it clenched a rock soiled with brown plant juice. The creature had been in the process of mashing roots. Surprised by its level of domestication, Jerrick still noted the wildness in the creature's unnatural, straw-colored eyes, in its lack of clothing, and in its wild hair and blackened teeth. He shuddered with distaste. "Let's get moving." Kara brushed past Jerrick and took the lead. Jerrick waited for both Murik and Ash to pass before he joined them. As he moved to follow, a glint of metal at one of the felled creature's fingers caught his eye. Jerrick bent and lifted its hand. Filth and mud were caked onto its skin, caught between the fingers so the object, a ring, was hardly visible. Jerrick wiped some of the muck off, revealing a simple gold band etched with the familiar oak tree sigil of the Simmaron patrollers. A ring bearing such a mark was given to newly promoted recruits once indoctrinated into the patroller fold. There was no way to know which patroller the thing had taken it from, nor exactly how the fiend had come to possess it. Jerrick was reasonably sure the patroller to whom it belonged had not simply handed it over, though. Jerrick removed the ring from the creature's finger and slipped it into his belt pouch. Kara spotted the next of the creatures, the knight having enough sense to duck behind the thick trunk of a nearby oak before she was spotted. The others did likewise, Murik finding a place behind another tree with Ash, while Jerrick went down to a crouch behind some leafless shrubs. Raising his head above the top edge of his hiding place, Jerrick peered through the mist. His eyes went wide as all around them, yellow eyes lit up the gray night. Jerrick cursed himself for a fool. They were surrounded by Chayek's bloody axe. Nohr smashed a balled-up fist down upon one of the few chairs remaining intact in the great room of the hall. The high-backed seat fell to splintered pieces at the impact. "The devils got them all." Skave shared in both Nohr's disappointment and his anger, for they had reached the hall only to find it empty except for the presence of 2 donkeys in the stables. "The devils did their work too well," Skave said in confirmation, as he wrought his own destruction on some of the hall's furniture. "They've already been taken. Not just the girl, but, as you said, all of them." Nohr crushed another chair, took a few great breaths, then asked, "What we gonna do now?" When Skave did not answer, he leaned his great warhammer against the wall, swung the beer keg from his back, and, lifting it high, took a long draught. He restoppered it, then wiped his mouth with the back of his arm and emitted a belch which echoed from the chamber's high walls. Skave walked about the chamber, studying the packs and equipment their prey had left behind. The witch had wanted the girl to fall under her devil's spell. For what purpose, Skave cared little. But the others, the sorcerer, the knight, and the patroller, were supposed to have been left behind for him and Nohr to deal with. Skave felt betrayed. But why had the witch sent them all of this way for nothing? What did she hope to gain by tricking them? Nohr placed his warhammer and keg upon one of the long tables, and not seeing a chair large enough for his great bulk, satisfied himself by leaning against the wall. "I say we go back to Graal and forget all about knights and patrollers." Skave held up a gloved finger. "Wait." He moved to the great hearth and sifted through the things strewn upon the floor there. Someone had left in haste, but not so fast they'd left everything behind. He grabbed one of the packs, taking in its contents with a glance. Their weapons and armor are gone. Some rations remain. He waved his hand over the intruder's belongings. But not many. Nohr narrowed his brow at the Harek. So? Perhaps the devils did not take all of them after all? Nohr's head tilted sideways, his ear, the one not missing the top half, arched forward. Huh? Skave groaned in frustration. The girl was supposed to be taken, right? She was. When the others discovered her missing, perhaps they decided to follow, to try and save her. Skave moved toward the great doors, talking all the while, but now more to himself than Nohr. The devils worked their hoodoo on the girl, who rose and left the chamber. The others woke. Perhaps the door creaked, or some such thing. Seeing their friend gone, they went outside to investigate. Skave walked outside and down the porch steps. Behind him, Nohr hoisted his keg to his back, grabbed his hammer, and followed. "These prints here are small. A woman's," Skave said, looking at the ground now. She wore boots and walked with an even stride. But these... Skave crouched low, cursing his own stupidity as his eyes passed over his and Nohr's boot prints. He only hoped enough evidence remained. Then he saw it. A single barefoot print, indented deep in the soil. Skave ran a gloved finger lightly across the deep indentation of the heel, across the rising sole, then into the crevasse created by the toes. The person had been running, and the size, while not petite, was too small for a man. The knight. Skave knew it was no other. He followed the prints as they led away from the hall and toward the forest. Some were trod upon by booted feet going both the same and opposite directions. The stalker, focusing on the knight's footprints for the time being, saw they went both away from and toward the hall. He followed them to the wall of trees and, motioning for Nohr to stay put, crept forward. He walked a few more steps and saw where the barefoot and booted prints diverged. He smiled knowingly, then returned to the patio where the Gaugath remained. The knight pursued her friend and the devils into the forest. She is either very brave or very stupid. She came back, though, empty-handed, at which time her friends joined her. They provisioned themselves with food, weapons, and armor. The knight put something on her feet. Skave laughed. Then they set out together. "You think we can find them?" Nohr asked. Skave laughed again. "Of course. Their tracks are as plain as day, and they couldn't have gotten far. If we hurry..." Nohr, needing no further prompting, gestured for the stalker to lead the way. Skave obliged, and the two set off in pursuit. Jerrick rose, not caring that he put himself in full view as he pulled his bowstring as far as his strength allowed. He let fly one arrow and then another, the familiar swish of their flight filling his ears as each found their mark, and two of the creatures fell dead. Meanwhile, Murick also stepped out from his place of concealment as globes of light too numerous to count sprang forth from the sorcerer's hands and moved upward in all directions. Then, one by one, each of the globes exploded into a luminosity so bright it was as if the morning sun had risen. The extreme change from misted shadow to near daylight momentarily blinded Jerrick, but it did worse to the creatures, who recoiled from it as if in pain. Pausing only a moment for his eyes to adjust, Jerrick shouldered his bow, then drew his sword and hunting knife. He spotted a number of newly formed gaps where before a solid line of yellow eyes had been, and he wasted no time in exploiting one of them. As he plunged forward, he heard Kara issue a challenge. Two of the fiends leaped in front of Jerrick. There was time only for a quick slash with his sword. He heard a wail of pain as his blade bit, then nothing as he was past them and moving away. Another of the creatures, this one armed with a woodsman's axe, leaped at Jerrick. The patroller ducked beneath the axe's blade and, his desire to locate Holly overriding all else, launched himself forward. He thought he might have fought his way clear of the worst of them, but the unblinking eyes all around squashed such hopes. His only chance of finding Holly had been to locate her before all hell had broken loose. Now Jerrick knew they'd be lucky to get out alive themselves. Despite the sense of hopelessness rising within him, Jerrick kept up the search. Looking in all directions as he ran, he saw the eyes closing in around him. Then something latched onto his shoulders and he was pulled backward. Unbalanced, he fell. But instead of damp earth, he felt the firmness of muscle and bone as the mephitic smell of unwashed body odor threatened to overcome his senses. Realizing he had fallen onto one of the fiends, Jerrick elbowed it, the creature's grasp loosening as the patroller rolled away. He whipped his sword around to keep it at bay while he scrambled to his feet. Though the fiend lunged at him, Jerrick's sword warned it back as it retreated beyond the weapon's range. The naked creature was much like the others. Though taller, limbs a bit more lanky, and body more sallow skin than hair. Its primal eyes possessed the same wildness, though, with lips curled into a snarl as it circled Jerrick. The creature kept clawed hands extended from its sides, its fingers curled and claws pointed at him. Then it lunged again. Jerrick swung low with his sword, then followed with a backhanded slice of his knife. His sword hit nothing, but the knife slashed into the beast's arm. Far from pressing the attack or even delivering a counter, the creature retreated, holding its wounded arm close to its body as it flashed Jerrick a hurt look, as if the patroller had done something wrong. For just an instant, the madness left its eyes, and something in them looked, impossible as it was, familiar. It can't be. As the chaos continued all around him, Jerrick examined the creature more closely, looking past the unnaturally colored skin, the wild hair, and the madness already returning to its eyes. Ivar? Impossible. The creature lunged again. This time, Jerrick sidestepped the attack and brought the hilt of his sword down hard on the back of its head. The creature slumped to the ground, unconscious. Jerrick crouched next to it, peering about through the wizard's light for any others. Behind him, he heard Ash barking and Murik working his magic. Jerrick returned his knife to his sheath and, while he kept one eye on the other fiends, parted the hair covering the face of the unconscious one. He tried to imagine its appearance without the sallow skin and caked-on dirt, the line of the jaw, the bridge of the nose. How can this be? With none of the sense of triumph he had expected, Jerrick realized as he looked upon the face of his mentor and friend that he had discovered the fate of the missing patrollers. Everything fell into place then. The patrollers were not dead, but changed into something horrible. And he had slain with his own hands more of them than he cared to think on. If only I had known. But he hadn't. He thought of the patroller ring stowed away in his pouch. Somehow, he had been unable to put two and two together. But it was such an impossible thought that even now he struggled to find some other explanation. There wasn't one, though. His eyes and his instincts did not betray him. Ivar and the other patrollers had been made into devils. Jerrick wrapped his cloak around Ivar's naked form and hefted the bundle over his shoulder. He was never going to find Holly in all of this. For all he knew, she was already one of them, something which made locating her all the more difficult. Jerrick and the others needed to leave now, before more of the creatures, the patrollers, were killed. Jerrick retreated back whence he had come, finding the way clear. He reached the others shortly. Time to go. Kara slashed into one of the patrollers turned fiends, disemboweling it before Jerrick could stop her. It grabbed at its gut for a moment, then fell. The moment Kara saw the body slumped over Jerrick's shoulder, she fell into line beside him. One of Murik's hands burned with crimson flames. The other held his staff, which burned with fire of its own. All around him, bodies and the lowermost branches of the surrounding trees were charred and blackened. The Eslar held a dozen of the patroller fiends at bay. "Do not harm them," Jerrick shouted. Murik flashed him a quizzical look. Then he said, "Go, I shall cover our retreat." Kara and Ash, whom Jerrick kicked as he passed to force him to join the retreat, withdrew. Jerrick glanced over his shoulder and saw Murik backing away. Then, with one last burst of flame, which was more warning than anything else, the sorcerer ran to join them. One of the patroller fiends jumped out in front of the knight, who moved to engage it. Jerrick shouldered past Kara, knocking her sword astray. Then he felled the patroller fiend, a woman with long streaming hair, with a glance from his sword's hilt. "What are you doing?" Kara asked. "Leave her, let's go," Jerrick shouted over his shoulder. Their retreat came to a dead stop as more of the creatures emerged ahead of them. "It seems we are again surrounded," Murik said. Jerrick watched as the patrollers turned fiends drew closer, tightening the noose about them. Murik's magical flame had extinguished. The sorcerer looked haggard. His body was bent, his shoulders slumped, and even the weight of his staff looked too much for him. The globes of light he had summoned earlier faded rapidly now, and already the area plunged back into mist and shrouded darkness. Despite the energy his spellcasting had drained from him, though, something in Murick's eyes told Jerrick he was prepared to summon his magic once more, rather than surrender to their adversaries. Next to Jerrick, Kara lifted her sword. Her face remained unreadable behind the cover of her helmet. The creatures were coming now. Jerrick had to stop the others before any more of the patrollers were killed. "Don't harm them." "What?" Kara said. "They killed the patrollers. They're about to do the same to us." "They didn't kill the patrollers. They are the patrollers." Jerrick missed whatever reaction Murick and Kara displayed as the patroller fiends closed in on them. There was a sensation of warmth as Murick brought his magical fire back to life. At his other side, Kara held sword and shield ready. Ash growled from somewhere behind him. Frantic, Jerrick tried to think of some way to prevent the continued bloodshed. There was no reasoning with the patrollers turned fiends. Yet Jerrick refused to raise his sword against them. But then the great withered oaks all around them started to shake and quiver, the few remaining leaves upon their branches falling like rain from the sky. The rattling gave the patroller fiends pause. They started to back away, but it was too late as the sickened oaks came to life. Branches, bent and twisted, reached out for them. Driven into a panicked frenzy, the patroller fiends bolted in all directions. Only some managed to get away. The rest were lifted up, grasped by limbs, torsos, and necks, and held tight. Though they squirmed and clawed away at the bark-covered appendages, there was no freeing themselves. A single figure walked amidst that twisted carnage. Wrapped in a hooded brown cloak, the newcomer moved with urgency. "The trees are weak," the stranger said, "and will only hold them for so long. Best you come with me." The voice was feminine, even-toned, and calm. She gave them no time to respond as she turned and, without waiting to see if they followed, walked back the direction she had come. Left with few other choices, they followed. She led them through the tangle of trees and patroller fiends unscathed, offering no opportunities for explanations or conversation as they left the lair behind. Traveling without pause, they traversed many miles before the woman finally stopped them within a secluded thicket. "We will rest here," she said, turning. But only for a moment. She started to move off, then stopped. "I believe others of your group await you." As if on cue, Aurum pushed his way through the thick bushes and pranced right up to Kara. Perched on the pommel of his saddle was Nohr. The knight, shooing the owl away, took Aurum's head in her hands, rubbing his nose in greeting before she turned her attention toward Jerrick and his sleeping burden. Jerrick saw the expectant look in the woman's eyes as he set his old friend, who was not Holly, down. Steeling his nerves, Jerrick prepared himself for the coming confrontation. It only took Kara a moment to realize the person they had rescued was not who she expected. Throwing her helmet to the ground, she made no effort to control her anger. "Who is this, and where is Holly?" Fearing too much heat from the battle remained in the woman, Jerrick chose his words carefully. "This is Ivar, a friend. I never saw Holly." Kara's sword was out in a flash, its point directed at Jerrick's chest. "Tell me why you brought that thing here and not Holly, and do it quickly." Her lips barely moved as she spoke, and Jerrick watched her jaw quiver as she fought to contain herself. "When I recognized Ivar—" "Damn you, patroller!" Kara inched her blade closer. "Holly is my responsibility. You were supposed to retrieve her, not this thing." "He is no thing." While uncomfortable staring down the length of Kara's blade, Jerrick was also losing patience. "He is Ivar, eldest of the elders." "I don't give a damn who he is. You should have—" "Enough!" Murick appeared next to them. With a gesture, the point of Kara's sword fell to the ground like a leaden weight. The sudden motion nearly ripped the sword from Kara's grasp. She managed to hold fast to the hilt, but only barely. Through clenched teeth, she said, "Release my sword, wizard. Murick stepped back and crossed his arms. Perhaps when you've come to your senses. Try though she might, Kara could not lift the sword's point from the ground. As her brow tensed with exertion, even her grasp on the hilt began to falter. Then, the weight finally too much, she let go. The weapon hit the ground with a thump. Jerrick could not have brought your friend back to you, their mysterious benefactor said, for your friend is no longer with the monsters. How do you know that? Kara asked. Who are you? The woman threw back the hood of her cloak, revealing dainty features, ivory skin, and, most striking of all, hair and eyes the color of dark emeralds. My name, she said, is Elia Starbow. Chapter 13. The Circle. The witch led Holly along a dark, circuitous path neither visible nor marked. Though the way was littered with spidery outcroppings of roots and clumps of jagged rock, the witch never once hesitated, her rapid pace both deliberate and unrelenting. Holly found the going difficult. The one and only time she said so, the witch threatened to rip her tongue out if she spoke again. Holly decided to remain silent after that. Not long into their journey, the weariness of the night's events caught up to Holly. Muscles ached, her head swooned, and she felt herself succumbing to an overwhelming need for sleep. Thereafter, it was all she could do to keep from falling to her knees as the witch forced her onward by way of the rope between them. Keeping the line from growing taut became a constant struggle. When it did, Holly was punished with a swift tug which jolted her from her fatigue-induced trance and, more often than not, catapulted her to her knees. She regained her feet each time, though, refusing to allow the witch to drag her through the woods like a laden sack. As the night wore on, the mist thinned before them, and Holly saw pinpoints of stars shining above. They were dim in comparison to the moon, though, which shone near full now, only the smallest sliver remaining dark. The forest landscape changed from the flat terrain Holly had grown familiar with into shallow, undulating hills which formed small valleys with each rise and fall. The two descended into one of these shallow valleys, picking their way through shrubs and thorny bushes that snagged and tore Holly's clothing at every step. The witch, for all her size and voluminous robes, passed through unobstructed, the foliage seeming to shrink from her person. Holly lost track of time as the witch forced her deeper and deeper into this new part of the Simmaron. Eyelids drooped of their own accord, but fear of the witch and sharp pricks from the bushes kept her awake. Finally, when the bard's bare hands, forearms, and face bled from a score of small cuts, and she felt as if she might finally collapse from exhaustion, the witch stopped. Holly's concentration was fixed on the ground before her, and so at first she did not see the great gaping maw cut into the earth before them. When she did see it, she could look nowhere else. Blacker than blackest night, the dark pit took hold of her, drawing her inside. A chill went down her spine, and her knees, of a sudden, felt weak. Holly knew if the rope did not bind her fast to the witch, she would have already turned and fled. Looking from dark pit to witch, Holly asked in a voice which sounded small even to her own ears, "What is this place?" The great shape of the witch, her face remaining hidden within the darkness of her cowl, turned to her. Holly shrank back in fear, remembering her abductor's threat. She wanted very much to keep her tongue. "You are a bard, yes?" Holly's hand went to the neck of her mandolin, which miraculously had remained with her throughout the night's ordeal. She nodded a response. "Then you shall no doubt appreciate this place, for it is steeped in history." The witch turned to face the pit once more. It is a dark and evil history, but history nonetheless. There was something there in that pit, pulling at Holly, hungering for her. The feeling made her tremble. "Ah, you feel it, don't you?" Holly wanted to ask what it was, but her mouth refused to form the words. "As long as one remains at a distance," the witch said, "its effects are subtle. Ordinarily, it might take weeks to feel. but this close for such a small, paltry girl. Nausea welled up from the pit of Holly's stomach, boiling over into her throat and mouth, and she clenched her jaw to keep from retching. Despite the chill air, sweat seeped from her pores and her head swam. Her knees swayed, and, unable to maintain her balance any longer, she collapsed to the ground. The forest around her spun. From somewhere far off, she heard the sound of the witch's hissing laughter. "It is too much for you, all of it hitting you at once." She laughed again. "Only give it time, and you shall grow more accustomed to its foulness." Holly curled up on her side, her entire body awash in feebleness as she drew her knees close. "Let me go." Tears fell from her eyes unchecked. "Please, let me go." She was never meant for this. She should be home in Celia, protected behind city walls where others could keep her safe. She was neither knight, nor sorcerer, nor patroller. She was just a small girl who had foolishly harbored grand, romantic delusions of heroes, and who had mistakenly thought that perhaps she might be one too. "Get up, girl," the witch said, waiting a moment for Holly to rise. When she did not, the witch said again, "Get up." Jerking the rope hard, the witch sent Holly sprawling forward. Before the witch pulled again, Holly fumbled to her knees and, still sobbing, rose. The witch moved closer. Holly thought to pull away, but there was no fight left in her. "Wear this." The witch held out a simple talisman, a medallion woven of grass forming two concentric circles hanging from a leather string. Holly took it without thinking, placing it over her head as the witch so motioned. "It shall protect you from the magic I have cast over this place." Then, saying nothing more, the witch stepped into the dark pit. Holly hoped, prayed, she disappeared as if stepping over a cliff. To her disappointment, the witch did not. Instead, as the witch took each successive step, she descended farther into the earth, until nothing remained of her. As the rope separating them began to grow taut, Holly knew it was her turn. She stumbled forward until she stood at the pit's edge. The dark hole lay at the base of a tor whose slopes were covered by a jumble of rocks and loose, sandy soil. Oaks all around it were like simulacra of death, blackened and charred as if burned by fire, though no ash littered the ground. Holly took one last look at the night sky. Then she stepped over the threshold and into the hole. Right away, she found solid ground underfoot, which sloped downward the farther she walked. Then, her head sank below the line of the earth and everything turned to black. The witch did something, and torches embedded in the walls to either side of them flared to life. Holly jumped as one very near her head lit up in a shower of sparks. Then she watched as more and more lit up a long, narrow corridor descending deeper into the earth. The walls and floor of the passage were calloused limestone, and a fine layer of dust covered all. The witch, who had not halted her progress even to ignite the torches, continued moving forward. Holly followed in silence. They descended for only minutes before the passage evened out. The air grew warm and stale, and then they were entering a chamber so vast Holly found herself taken aback with awe at the sight of it despite her weariness. Lit by a greenish glow, the chamber was so enormous the opposite wall, if there even was one, lay beyond the range of her vision. The ceiling rose high and irregular before also disappearing. Before them, torches set at eye level marked a byway meandering through a forest of stalagmites. Somewhere in the distance, Holly heard the echo of a drip. Though the air here was cooler than it had been while descending, it remained stagnant and smelled of staleness. The witch tugged the rope, jerking Holly from her inspection as she led them down the torch-marked trail. Turning this way and that, Holly became lost almost immediately as stalagmites twice her height enveloped them. Every booted step sent a litany of echoes bouncing off the cavern walls, and she found herself casting glances over her shoulder, half expecting some disturbed cave creature to swoop down and snatch her away. Then, There was a break in the limestone formations, and Holly saw something she was sure was not natural. The torches ended at a series of steps carved into the cavern floor. The steps encircled a large, raised platform. At the top of the platform, Holly saw more stalagmites. The witch went right up to the stairs and began climbing. As Holly mounted each step behind her, the feeling of sickness and nausea intensified. Whatever was causing her unease lay close. When they had climbed the last of the steps, Holly saw the pool. Filled nearly to the brim with a turbid liquid which seethed and boiled, it took up most of the dais. Surrounding it were 4 gray obelisks, 10-foot statues Holly had earlier mistaken for stalagmites, which were carved to resemble hooded sorcerers. They faced one another across the bubbling pool, arms outstretched with palms held away as if each pushed against something unseen, and through their concerted effort, contained. Though the steam wafting from the surface gave Holly the impression the liquid was hot, she felt no heat emanating from the pool. Craning her neck upward, Holly just saw pinpricks of stars shining through a wide, slanted shaft which extended all the way to the outside. Think of the stories you could tell of this place, the songs you could write, the witch said. A pity you shall not live to do so. Eh? Holly had dried her tears on the way down the passage. Now, acceptance of her predicament lent her an odd sense of courage. Like a person drowning, she felt there was nothing worse which could happen to her, and so she asked the witch directly, "What do you mean? What are you going to do to me?" The witch did not answer as she led Holly around the edge of the pool to a set of manacles fastened to the pool's stonework. She forced Holly to sit with her back to the pool's edge, then fastened one manacle about each of her wrists. The witch then reached into her robe and pulled out a vial filled with a gray liquid. She unstoppered the cork, and without a word, grabbed Holly's throat and forced her head back. Squeezing her cheeks with long, claw-tipped fingers, she forced Holly's jaw open, poured the contents of the vial into her mouth, then closed her lips, holding her until satisfied the potion had been swallowed. Though Holly struggled every step of the way, she was physically exhausted and too weak to offer significant resistance. The liquid felt cool as it filled her mouth and throat, but the taste was so awful that, as soon as the witch released her grip, she was overcome by a fit of choking. "Retch it back up," the witch said, "and I'll only pour more down your throat." The witch started to shuffle off, but stopped after a few steps. Speaking from over her shoulder, she said, "Touch the pool's surface at your own peril." Offering nothing more, she descended just to the topmost step, then turned and fell to her knees. Lifting both hands to the cowl which had obscured her visage since the first moments Holly had looked upon her, the witch pulled it back in one quick motion. Holly had spent the better part of the night's journey pondering the identity of the witch, and so it surprised her little to discover she was Sitheri, that race of reptilians who made their homes in the Grimmer Swamp. Her great size and serpentine voice had been the first clues Holly had gathered. But even with these indicators, something had remained missing. Sitheri possessed great, broad tails that could break a man's legs with the force of their sweep. Holly, even now, failed to see such an appendage sprouting from the witch's posterior. There was, however, no doubt as to what race she belonged. Holly had seen Sitheri before in Cilia and elsewhere, but those had always been males, who often left their broods to prove their worth in a barbaric ritual of scalp collecting. Despite her gender, this Sitheri was as large as any of those others. Her face was a short, snake-like snout with nostril holes at the tips. Teeth both foul and bent lined her jaw, and her eyes were dark and beady. Jagged ridges ran up from her neck and along either side of her head. Her scales were mottled and gray, with pieces hanging like dried skin from her cheeks and neck. The witch held an instrument resembling a writing quill. As she went to work with it, Holly heard deep scratching noises, and she realized the Sitheri witch was not so much writing as etching into the stone itself. Looking at the dais's edge, she noticed for the first time the presence of engravings. They were strange symbols the bard had never seen before. Noise from the witch's work became hypnotic. Though Holly resisted, she found herself dozing off. The echo of footfalls scraping across the cavern floor woke her an indeterminate amount of time later. Blinking away sleep, she looked for the source of the noise and spotted a greckle emerging from the entry passage. The goblin lurched forward on all fours, muttering something unintelligible to itself. It seemed not to have noticed Holly at first. When it did, its expression turned to one of pure delight. Black lips curled back into a devilish grin, pointed ears perked, and its curled chin unfurled to stick out like the blade of a dagger as it scampered toward her. As it drew closer, she saw in greater detail its claws and teeth. Then the greckle was in front of her, leaning so close it almost pressed its face against hers. The creature's tongue shot out, and Holly turned her face away, disgusted. "Ah, a tasty human," it said. As she felt its tongue slide along her cheek, revulsion transformed into anger. Balling her hand into a fist, Holly smacked the greckle's pointy-chinned face square on. The goblin flew back through the air, landing on its feet just at the edge of the dais, where its momentum promptly toppled it over the side. A loud shriek punctuated each impact as its gangly body tumbled end over end all the way to the bottom. Stunned but angry, the greckle came charging back up the stairs, screeching all the way. "Leave her, Speck!" the witch screamed from the other side of the dais. "She is not for eating." Speck slowed, and then stopped. His teeth remained bared at Holly, and she saw venom in his eyes. "Once my mistress is done with you," it said to her, "you shall be a tasty morsel indeed." Speck took a moment to spit in Holly's direction before joining the witch. When Speck stood at her feet, it said, "I bring that which you have asked for, O mighty harbinger of death, O patroller slayer, O ruler of the Simmaron, O—" "Just give it to me, you insipid little creature," the witch hissed. Speck jumped back in surprise. It took him a moment to regain his composure. When he did, he held out a hand to her, and something unseen passed between them. "You have done well, my slave. Now return to my house, and there await me." Speck bowed, shooting one last look at Holly, a look that promised retribution, before he left the chamber. The witch returned to her task, and Holly was wondering if she might fall asleep again when the witch spoke. "Speck is an annoying little creature, but he serves me well." It took a moment for Holly to realize the witch spoke to her. Once she did, she was unsure how to respond. Sleep had returned some of her senses to her, though, and she let her inquisitive nature guide her. She needed to know what the witch was doing, and more importantly, what she planned. If there was any chance at all of getting out of this alive, she needed to gather as much information as possible. "What are you doing?" The question sounded too direct, and Holly was sure the witch meant to ignore her. She was surprised when the witch answered. "I create a circle of power, a witch's circle." The Cytherea did not look up from her work as she spoke. "A means by which you can channel power, amplify your spells." The witch did look up then, but only for a moment. "You are familiar with the ways of witchcraft?" Holly shrugged. "Only what I know from stories." The bard searched her mind. "In The Witch of Ekbar, an old woman, a witch, creates a circle, then uses it to cast a charm over all the children of Ekbar. Without the circle, her spell might not have worked, nor been so effective. The witch, having successfully created another of the strange symbols, moved along the circumference of the dais to create the next. This witch, what did she do with the children?" Holly swallowed. "She led most of them over a cliff. They were so ensnared by her magic, they never even saw the edge." "And those she did not lead over the cliff?" "She took them deep into the forest and ate them." The witch hissed a laugh. Why did she do this thing to the children of Ekbar? Because she wanted to live in their town, but their parents drove her out with pitchforks and threats. She knew a burning stake awaited her if she ever returned. The witch remained silent, her full concentration upon her work for a time. Then she picked up the conversation as if there had been no pause at all. Scorned and feared. She shook her head, and her serpentine tongue flicked out for a moment. What else could this witch have done? If only the citizens of Ekbar had opened their homes to her. Perhaps the witch was the one who should have been friendlier, Holly said, and not sacrificed innocent children just to satisfy her need for revenge. The witch shrugged, then held up her quill and said, "The punishment of the parents shall be handed down to their children. Such goes the old witch adage." That still didn't give her the right to do what she did. The witch shrugged again, then returned to her etchings. Holly watched her for a time, but after a short while, felt herself succumbing to sleep once more. A sharp prick at her neck woke her sometime later. Opening her eyes, she discovered the witch hunched over her, a dagger held to her throat. Holly tried to back away, the rattle of the chains reminding her of her confinement. The witch leaned closer. "You will be quiet now, else I will cut out your tongue." Not a sound. She swiped the air with the dagger for emphasis before concealing it beneath her robe. Holly breathed a sigh of relief as the witch moved away. But then the Sith returned, leaning over her and reaching out. Holly shrank back, fearing the witch had changed her mind about cutting out her tongue, but the witch was only reaching for Holly's mandolin, which she took hold of and unceremoniously smashed on the pool's edge. Already damaged from when Holly had fallen on it, a single impact was all it took to finish the job as the witch cracked the instrument in half. The strings were the only thing holding the broken pieces together. The witch tossed the ruined mandolin aside where it clattered down the dais' steps. Holly bit her lip as the witch destroyed her instrument. It had been a gift from Brayton, a reminder of all she had accomplished under his tutelage. Seeing it shattered had an equal effect on Holly's resolve, and she sank back, distraught. Though her muscles were stiff and sore from her recent slumber on the hard platform, she felt she had not slept long. Stars still shone through the opening in the ceiling, and torches shone throughout the chamber. At her back, the pool continued to bubble. The witch, standing at the topmost step just outside of the circle, turned to face the pool as she bowed her head and closed her eyes. To either side of her, the tall obelisks stood silent watch. Her arms hung limp at each side as she chanted a series of phrases in a language unfamiliar to Holly. Then she lifted her arms high before her, the palms of her hands held down toward the pool. Holly listened as the witch intoned, "O spirits of the dark earth, O denizens of the night, I summon thee now. Bring your unholy blessings unto this place. Let thy energies be focused with mine. And this circle's sealed against those who would do me harm." The witch took one step over the line of sigils and entered the circle. She walked clockwise around its inner circumference, careful to stay within its boundary. She completed one rotation, then another, and another. Then, when she reached the exact point where she had started, the Sithari turned so she faced away from the pool. Beneath her, Holly felt the ground shake. Then, all at once, the sigils the witch had so painstakingly carved into the dais' floor began to glow. Subtle at first, they soon shone brighter until they provided an illumination all their own. The witch seemed not to notice as she continued her incantation. "O dark elemental spirits of the north, I summon thee now. Bring your unholy blessings unto this place. Let thy energies be focused with mine, and this circle sealed against those who would do me harm." The witch repeated the incantation 3 times, each utterance spoken with identical inflections. Then she walked the inner circumference of the circle, opposite from before. 3 times she circled it before stopping to face west. She repeated the identical incantation, altering only the dark spirits she called upon as dictated by the direction she faced. Then she circled the markings again, walking clockwise this time. She repeated her ritual facing south and then east. Finally, she walked the circumference one last time and was done. Then the spirits came. They were like the wind, fleeting and without form, entering through the ceiling chute and coming down to the dais from all sides. Like whiffs of mist, they sailed along the outer edge of the witch's circle. Their wailing, a horrible mixture of pain and sorrow, grew so loud Holly covered her ears with her hands. Even then, her head rang from the sound. Pain lanced through her mind, and she felt something warm and moist on her palms. Holding her hands out before her, she saw they were covered in blood. Then, one by one, the spirits joined with the circle's symbols. Each sigil glowed anew as more of the dark spirit energy gathered there. Soon the symbols were so bright it hurt Holly's eyes to look upon them. She screamed, and somehow above the wailing, shrieking, and moaning, she heard the witch laughing. Closing her eyes, Holly buried her face beneath her arms, praying for it all to end. Mercifully, Holly passed out long before the spirits completed their work. Chapter 14. Hallowed Ground. Though they inundated Elia Starbo with question after question, asking first and foremost about Holly, but also what the woman knew of events in the forest, Elia adamantly refused to answer any of them right away. Instead, glancing back in the direction they had come, she called an end to their rest, insisting they follow her from the diminishing safety of the thicket back into the woods. She informed them neither of their destination nor how long to get there, as without waiting to see if they followed, she strode away. There was no discussion between Jerrick, Murick, and Kara. Once Murick had undone the spell on Kara's sword, they simply followed. Kara took hold of Auram's reins, stomping off after Elia. Murick seemed not to notice the parting glare she cast his way as he busied himself calling Sinar to him. Once the owl had rejoined the Eslar, the two followed in Kara's wake, leaving Jerrick alone with Ash and a still unconscious Ivar. Somewhere in the distance, Jerrick heard a howl he knew came from one of the patroller fiends. Next to him, Ash whined. Jerrick expected pursuit. He also knew distance was their best and only acceptable defense. He'd allow no one to spill more patroller blood this night. Jerrick knelt before his friend, reaching out to brush an errant strand of gray hair from the elder's face. Looking upon him, Jerrick was overcome by a strange mixture of disgust, pity, and, worst of all, fear that Ivar might be trapped in his current condition forever. If there was no solution, if there was no way to change him back, Jerrick knew what responsibility fell to him. Better a quick end than a life of dementia and depravity. He knew Ivar would expect nothing less of him. Another howl, this one closer, shook Jerrick from his thoughts, prompting him to scoop up Ivar and, led by Ash, set off in pursuit of the others. He settled in behind them, while Ash satisfied himself by running up their line past Elia, stopping only when he had run too far ahead. As soon as Elia caught up, he darted off again, repeating the exercise over and over and never tiring of it. Jerrick hoped Ash's renewed enthusiasm was a good sign. Elia remained aloof and uncommunicative throughout the journey. Jerrick, for his part, left her alone, though it pained and disappointed him that their reunion happened under such circumstances. Though her only acknowledgement of his presence thus far had been a brief nod following the commotion stirred up by Kara, Jerrick did not think the distance she kept between them indicative of any ill will she felt toward him. It was this place, and all that had happened. Elia was special in many ways. She was a half-dryad, her lineage a mixture of Jerrick's own kind and that of the fairies. Her mother, Videa Dawn Oak, was a dryad of the Simmaron whom Jerrick had always suspected of not really caring for him much. Eliah's father was an enigma. Jerrick doubted even Videa knew who he was, for dryads did not cast their wiles upon men for conversation. Some might out of loneliness, but Videa's grove was home to many, a sort of commune. Jerrick was shown its general location during his training and informed, if he valued his dignity, to never enter except by invitation. While the dryads never harmed patrollers, their relationship with the hall remained guarded, for they valued their solitude. Despite these warnings, more than one recruit had been dared into infringing upon the grove's borders in something that became, over time, a sort of ritualistic rite of passage. A warning from the dryads, a wad of prickly thorns in the posterior or a prolonged interval hanging upside down from a tree, usually served as adequate discouragement until the next novice was pressured into entering the grove. Jerrick had never participated in such games, for he had never had to. By some chance of fate, he became friends with Eliah early on. Accompanied by the half-dryad, Jerrick had been allowed into the grove on more than one occasion. At the time, he'd felt honored. But it seemed so long ago now, as if it had all happened not only in another lifetime, but in someone else's life. So much had happened since those early years when his and Eliah's friendship had bloomed. Even more had happened since they parted company some 6-odd years ago. For Jerrick, the last 2 of those years, since Kendra's death, had been hard ones, and the passage of time had taken its toll. But for all the change Jerrick saw in Eliah's appearance, those 6 years might as well have been 6 days. The woman looked no different now than she had then, for even half-dryads reckoned time differently from others, aging slower and marking time distinctively because of it. For Jerrick, it was like stepping back in time. She was still beautiful, still possessed of that fascinating, otherworldly aura. But there was something different about her. For the briefest moment when she had first introduced herself to the others and her gaze had crossed with his own, Jerrick saw something in her eyes the like of which he'd not seen there before. Grief and sorrow. He was reminded of the woman's words from that night when he and Ash had crossed the Ugal Mountains. Dead. They're all dead. At the time, Jerrick was certain Eliah spoke of the patrollers. Now, he wondered. The patrollers might not be themselves, but they were very much alive. Eliah must have been referring to some other group. But whom? He thought he knew the answer, but it was too terrible to think on any longer, and so he allowed his thoughts to grow idle for a spell. As the hours passed, he grew wearier and wearier from his burden. At Murik's urging, they tried to place Evar over Kara's saddle. Aurum, spooked by the smell of the man-turned-fiend, wanted nothing of it, as the destrier sidestepped away from any such attempts. Kara gave the others a shrug, then offered her steed to them instead. Murik and Eliah shared the saddle for a time, while Kara, who lightened Jerrick's burden by carrying Ivar, plodded along on foot. Despite the weight of her armor and her own obvious fatigue, she uttered no complaints. They crossed an old game trail which Jerrick remembered hunting along years ago. Eliah's pace allowed no time for reminiscing, though, as she continued to plunge them deeper into the forest. Even still, an inkling of where they were headed formed in Jerrick's mind as familiarity with certain landmarks returned to him. He kept his suspicions to himself, though, and another 2 hours passed before Eliah finally slowed her pace. It was as if a veil had been lifted, for in this place they saw life once more. Oaks standing healthy and strong rose up all around them, while tufts of shrubbery and patches of wildflowers and grass littered the spaces between them. They heard the songs of night birds and the buzz of insects, and they each wondered if they had somehow been lured to sleep and left to traverse a dream. Fearful of breaking the spell, or of waking, none of them spoke as they followed Eliah deeper into the sudden beauty. When they reached a small glen where a rivulet flowed between sandy shores, Eliah halted their progress. "The monsters will not venture here," she said. "Here, you are safe." Kara set Ivar down close to the water. Staring in wide-eyed wonder, she asked, "What is this place?" "We are within my mother's grove, called Sullen Kell by the patrollers." Murick's face lit up. "The name means Grove of Beauty." Alaya nodded in affirmation. Jerrick, his earlier suspicion confirmed, remembered the place well. It possessed such timeless beauty, it was difficult to forget. Much like Jerrick's perception of Alaya, though, something seemed amiss. The half-dryad's words came to him once more then, and his suspicions were confirmed. His face must have betrayed his realization, for Alaya answered his question before he asked it. "It is true, Jerrick." She spoke softly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "My mother, Vadea Donok, is dead, as are the other dryads who shared this grove with her. It is them I spoke of the night I contacted you. The life and vitality you look upon," she said, raising her arms to indicate the area around them, "is a fading illusion, for even here the forest's taint does its work, seeping into the earth and killing from the root up. My kin resisted for as long as possible. By the time I arrived, they were already gone." Jerrick struggled to form words adequate enough to offer Alaya some measure of comfort. But what could he possibly say to alleviate the pain and loss of losing one's entire family? For every one of the dryads had been a sister, aunt, or cousin to her. More than that, her mother had been one of the casualties. "I'm sorry, Alaya." Woefully inadequate, it was all he managed. Kara took a few cautious steps toward Alaya. "We are all sorry." Behind her, Murick nodded his agreement. "We also thank you for helping us win free from the—" She cast a furtive glance at Jerrick, then left her sentence unfinished. "But I must know what has befallen my friend. You said before she was not with the monsters. Please, if you know where she is." Alaya wiped the glistening from her eyes, then said, "Your friend has been given over to the witch. Her name will not be spoken in this place." Surprise and puzzlement marked Kara's expression. "How do you—" The knight paused. More silence before the puzzlement disappeared and was replaced by purpose. "You must lead us to my friend. We must slay this witch before—" The sadness hanging over Alaya vanished as the woman drew herself up, cutting off Kara in mid-sentence. "If slaying her were such an easy task, do you not think I would have already done so?" Alaya's hands clenched into fists and her face became a mask of annoyance and anger. It was a display Jerrick had never witnessed before in the woman. "Do not presume to dictate my course or issue me orders, knight. I regret your friend's abduction, but there was no help for it. I tried to reach you all at the Hall of the Wood, but I was delayed. By the time I realized where you had gone, you were already root-deep in trouble." Alaya stopped to take a breath. The pause melted the tension from her, and her voice became softer. "Dawn is only a short while away. Your friend will be safe enough for the time being, for the witch will not perform her ritual until the light of the full moon shines high over the forest tomorrow night. We have until then." "What is this ritual you speak of?" Murick asked. "Can you tell us naught of her plans?" "I can tell you much, but first I must rest. For now, though, know that the witch is responsible for everything. The corruption of the forest, the morphing of the patrollers, the death of my ilk. There is more, but it will have to wait. The trees are weak. I am only a half-blood, but still I share in their weakness." She was intent on a quiet corner of the glen when Jerrick's voice halted her. "Alaya, wait. What of Evar?" The patroller's gaze strayed to his friend, who lay sleeping where he had set him down. "The witch's magic does not hold sway here," the half-dryad answered. "Not yet. Given time, the elder should return to his old self. Until then, he will sleep as his body and mind regain themselves." "If that is so," Jerrick said, "then surely hope remains for the others as well." Alaya met his gaze. For a moment, Jerrick thought she might say something to ease his fears, but she simply shrugged, then made for a corner of the glen. Unclasping her cloak, she wrapped it about her as she lay down with her back to the others. Muric, whose sorcery had exacted its own toll upon him, excused himself as he moved off to find his own place to recuperate. Once the Eslar was settled, Sonar perched on a low-hanging branch where both old and new masters were well within sight. Kara saw to Aurum, leaving the horse free to feed on the grove's wild grass, or simply to stand amidst it while he slept. Then, still adorned in her armor, the knight propped her back against a tree and laid her naked blade across her outstretched legs. Jerrick knew the group's idleness was driving her crazy. He saw it in her eyes and in the way she fidgeted with the hilt of her sword. But some part of her must realize they, herself included, needed rest if they were to be of any use saving Holly or anyone else. As Jerrick settled to the ground near Avar, he saw the knight's eyelids already drooping. As for himself, the lingering effect of the poison was gone from his system now. In its place was exhaustion. Unlike Kara, Jerrick surrendered to it. Next to him, Ash pressed against his side. Somehow, peculiar though it seemed, Jerrick felt reassured by Ash's presence, as thoughts of the patrollers, Ivar, and most of all, Alaya's brief comments concerning their enemy, this witch, flooded his mind. At last, he knew the fate of the patrollers. More than that, he knew who was responsible. If Alaya was right, and this witch's malediction was lifted from Ivar, then perhaps there was hope after all. When Jerrick woke, he felt as if he had slept the whole of the day away. The position of the sun said otherwise, though, for it was still early morning. Despite the brevity of his sleep, he gauged it had been no more than a few hours. He felt well rested. Some part of Solenkel remained magical even if darkness dwelt but a stone's throw away. Jerrick spied Alaya kneeling at the nearby stream. He watched her in silence for a moment as she splashed water on her face, then as she toweled herself dry with one end of her cloak. He wanted to announce his presence, but he found himself lost in his inspection of her. She was a dainty woman, slight of shoulder, with slender arms and legs. Her skin was neither soft nor rough, but somewhere betwixt the two, weather-worn from a life spent in the outdoors. Beneath the cloak she had removed, she wore leather breeches and a short-sleeved jerkin tied at the waist with a leather belt. Her hair, green like the leaves of a tree, hung long and loose, and she ran wet fingers through the tresses as she glanced sidelong at Jerrick and said, "I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't." Jerrick rose, ignoring the amused smile Alaya threw his way as he took quick stock of his surroundings. Ivar still lay next to him, as did Ash, who currently was busy stretching his body out full length. Jerrick shot a quick glance up at Sonar, who remained perched far too close for Jerrick's liking. Stooping over his old friend while keeping one eye on the bird, Jerrick found the elder looked markedly better already. His skin had shed the sick yellowish tinge, and his chest lifted with even, restful breaths. Jerrick let him sleep. The elder needed it. Kara, her chin resting on her armored chest, still slept as well. Muric was nowhere to be seen. Ash padded down to the stream for a drink. Jerrick followed. While the patroller took his turn refreshing himself, Alaya sat back and crossed her legs. "I was surprised to find your Eslar friend already up and about," she said. "He must have expended much energy casting his magic last night. We spoke briefly while you slept. I hardly know him, but already I like him." She paused for a moment, then gestured at Kara. "Your knight friend, on the other hand, I don't like. She's not very pleasant." Jerrick dried his face, then glanced at Alaya and grinned. "You're not just saying that because she's human, are you?" "Of course not." Alaya smiled back. "Are you implying I don't like your kind, Jerrick? I like you well enough, don't I?" "I don't know, do you?" Jerrick smirked as he sat across from her. "It's good to see you again, Alaya. And you. You look good, but older. and in need of a shave, as usual. Jerrick ran his hand across his emerging beard and laughed, momentarily forgetting Kara, who stirred at the noise. You look exactly as you did the last time I saw you. Jerrick sighed. You're not the same, though. I'm afraid the person you knew of old is gone, Elias said. My journey to the outside world opened my eyes in many ways. Opened them so much, in fact, I no longer wish to see any more of it. It is a wretched place your kind dwells within, Jerrick. Poverty, crime, disease. She sighed. I came back to the Simmaron only recently, thinking to escape it. I came back too late. They sat in silence for a moment. Kara stirred once more, but remained asleep. Tell me of your friends, Elias said. They're not friends. We're just traveling together. I see. Elias smiled. Still the loner? Jerrick shrugged. I suppose. We only met recently. He thought about that and almost laughed. It was only recently, though it seemed anything but. Homewood issued a call of heroes, and the knight and her friend, Holly, responded. The Eslar is here because... Jerrick stopped to think. He told me he was looking for a friend. Jerrick shrugged again. Me, I was just coming back for a visit of sorts. Elia nodded, then asked, And what of your gray friend here? She reached out, pulling Ash closer. The dog made no show of resistance as he plopped down into her lap and succumbed to her attentions. As I recall, you never had much fondness for animals. She arched a brow. Or was it they who did not bear fondness for you? Elia giggled. Jerrick rolled his eyes. Ash isn't mine. Not yours? Whose is he then? With all of the recent events, Jerrick hadn't time for thoughts of anything else, least of all his own guilt. Now the familiar feelings returned in a rush, and Jerrick groped at the right thing to say. I could just ask him, you know. Who? The dog? Have you forgotten? Speaking with Ash is no different for me than speaking with, for example, you. Oh. Jerrick raised a brow. So, talking to me is like talking to a dog? You certainly haven't lost your charm, Elia. Elia flashed him a wide grin, which, not able to help himself, he returned. They both laughed, disregarding any notions of courtesy for Kara or Ivar and suddenly not caring if all the evils of the forest descended upon them. It felt good, just sitting there, surrounded by the beauty of the Dryad Grove, two friends reunited. Never mind the circumstances of their reunion. It was enough they were together again, and so Jerrick let go of his inner feelings and felt everything returning to the past, when he and Elia had wandered the woods with only the cares and worries of youths to trouble them. He embraced that feeling until, inevitably, it faded. Like Elia, Jerrick was not the same person of old. He was in his 30s now, and far too old for idealistic dreams. Now there was room only for regrets. Their boisterousness finally woke Kara. The knight stirred, then screwed her face up as she wiped the sleep from her eyes. What time is it? She asked. Elia looked at Jerrick and shook her head. It is only early morning still, Jerrick said. Refresh yourself at the stream. In the meanwhile, I'll go find Murick. I shall accompany you, Elia said. She prodded Ash from her lap, then followed Jerrick. Ash decided to tag along behind them. As the trio left the glen, they settled into a slow walk paralleling the stream. Jerrick spent his time observing the beauty around him. Birds crisscrossed the way ahead of them. At either side, wild grass flourished and brambleberry vines slithered up elms and oaks. Jerrick stopped a moment to sample the berries. They tasted overripe, and inspect the leaves of the trees, which bore small, gray spots indicative of the wasting disease affecting other parts of the forest. It was as Elia had indicated. In time, even the beauty of her mother's grove was destined to falter, wither, and finally vanish. You still haven't told me who Ash calls master? Jerrick slowed his pace. Ash was my wife's, before her death. Alaya's expression transformed into one Jerrick had grown all too familiar seeing in other people when they learned of Kendra's passing. After it had happened, people from all corners of Rel, friends of Kendra's family, had come to express their condolences. For Jerrick, they became more hurtful reminder than comfort, for folk never looked at him the same. I'm sorry, Jerrick. I didn't even know you had been married. I was gone far too long. Alaya reached out to touch Jerrick's arm. How long has it been since she returned to the earth? Just over 2 years now. Jerrick swallowed. She died in childbirth, trying to give us a daughter. He turned away to face the stream. Alaya's touch fell away as he did so. Picking up a few pebbles, he tossed them into the water one by one. Our daughter's name was Anna. The name had been Kendra's favorite. Oh, she made sure I was happy with it, but I think she knew I'd be pleased with any name she liked. Jerrick smiled, a brief, fading gesture. The baby was stillborn. Kendra died shortly after. There was just too much. He tossed another pebble into the stream. I was happy without children, but Kendra wanted them. A real family, she said. Jerrick sighed and shook his head. I should have known better. Jerrick felt Alaya's eyes on him, studying him. You speak of your mother, she said. Jerrick said nothing. Her death. None of their deaths were your fault, Jerrick. Weren't they? If not for me, my mother might still be alive. If not for what? Nothing. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. What were you going to say? Jerrick remained silent, hoping Alaya let things be. He knew she was putting 2 and 2 together. He had killed his mother. Anna had killed. Surely. She stopped. Surely you do not blame the child for your wife's death. Jerrick didn't say anything at first. Then, in a whisper, why shouldn't I? Because it is ridiculous. Jerrick scattered the remainder of the pebbles in one toss and turned on Alaya. Something took hold of him, something pent up for far too long. His voice was loud, louder than he wished, but there was no longer any control. Just regrets. We were happy without that child. We were whole. We were fine. But, Alaya said, struggling to find the right words, she was your daughter, Jerrick, your own flesh and blood. You should be grieving for her, not weighing her memory down with blame. How can you possibly fault an infant for such a thing? My father had no qualms about doing so. But my father watched as I killed his wife. In the end, it was too much for him, and he left. Jerrick started to walk off, but then stopped. I never really understood the blame he placed upon me until I watched my own wife die. After that, I understand him now, at least a little. I'm going to find Murik. Alaya sighed. You're a better man than your father ever was, Jerrick. Someday you'll realize that. Jerrick disappeared into the dense foliage with Ash at his heels. Once out of sight, he stopped. Faint though they were, he heard Alaya's parting words. You're wrong, Alaya. I am the same as my father. Taking several deep breaths, he started off into the woods again. I am the same. Chapter 15. Parthen. Holly was lifted from the depths of slumber by a rough scratching at her cheek and forehead. Cracking lids heavy with sleep, she peered through her grogginess and saw nothing. There was darkness, but for a small suffusion of light so dim it revealed naught. Something about the dark soothed Holly. It was warm here, and quiet. The air smelled musty, but there was a familiar trace of lavender as well. Beneath her, she felt something not altogether soft, but comfortable nonetheless. Holly curled herself into a ball and shut her eyes, losing herself in the still quiet. She didn't know how long she lay like that, or if she drifted back to sleep, but she was dragged back to life once more when the rough sensation returned. Course, the feeling was not pleasant. It itched, abrading her skin so that, as if brushing at a fly, she waved her hand about her face to relieve the annoyance. Her hand met resistance. Even more, when she extended her hand, pushing against the barrier, something pushed back. Holly remembered everything then. The hideous forest creatures, the Sithari witch, the simmering pool and the statues looming over it, and the dark spirits summoned to fortify the witch's circle with their energies. The memories brought with them fright and terror. Her environment no longer felt so comforting, the darkness not quite so reassuring. Then she felt something on top of her. Panic seized Holly as she kicked out, thrashing with both arms and legs. Whatever it was remained. Holly renewed her efforts. Then light, like the rising sun, surrounded her, and she looked at her assailant, realizing it was nothing more nefarious than a wool blanket. She lay in a bed, the blanket tangled about her. Beneath her were a mashed pillow and a straw mattress. Meow. The sound came from the floor next to her. Peering over the mattress edge, Holly looked upon a cat she recognized instantly. Wilbur. The brown and black cat returned her stare for a moment, then sauntered off toward a bed opposite Holly's, which was neat and made up. Wilbur rubbed himself against one of the bedposts once, then twice, then padded back to his original position and sat. Wilbur, Holly said, calling to him again. Come here. The cat looked at her with wide eyes, his ears and whiskers drawn back. Holly sighed. She knew that look. I didn't know it was you. I'm sorry. Holly patted the mattress. Come here. The added motion of Holly's hand convinced Wilbur to leap up next to her. Holly grabbed him and held him close. Wilbur's such a good kitty. The cat closed his eyes and purred. Wilbur was an old friend, a stray whom Holly had initially bonded with by way of the food she left out on her windowsill each night. Where have you been? How did you... It struck her then, the oddity of the situation. She had been a prisoner, chained to a dark pool in some subterranean cave. Now, here she was, lying in a bed with a cat she had not seen in 6, or was it 7? Years. Something was not right. But for the life of her, as she looked about the room she recognized as the one she'd grown up in, she couldn't figure it out. Nor did she have any inkling as to how she'd gotten here. She knew where here was, though. The orphanage at Cilia, where dear Gracilla had taken Holly in and given her the closest thing to a true home she'd ever known. Holly glanced out the open window between her bed and the other. Warm sunlight and a slight breeze entered. The drapes, worn thin from age, drifted back and forth, revealing the food dish Holly always found empty each morning. It was, as expected, empty now. Wilbur meowed in protest as Holly set him aside. She swung her legs over the side of the bed so her bare feet touched the cold wood floor. Across from her, the other bed looked like it had not been slept in for some time. It had been like that, roommates coming and going over the years. The first had been Kirsta, the last, Amia. Neither had made it. The lavender Holly smelled earlier filled her senses again, and she looked to the top of a small, battered dresser where 3 stunted candles stood. They were gifts, or payment, for the help Holly had often provided to Lamok the candlemaker, whose old legs no longer carried him to the other side of the city where wild lavender and other plants he handpicked for use in his trade sprouted. She liked the smell the candles gave off. Their pleasantness chased away some of the must exuded by her bedding and the staleness always hanging heavy in the small room. Holly especially enjoyed the trips through the city. Holly stroked Wilbur's back and listened, half expecting to hear Barbadon, who ran the pub next door, shouting outside. The man was always yelling, but only because he was hard of hearing. But there was no Barbadon, only silence. Holly ran a hand through her mussed hair. It was short, not long like she had kept it while growing up. She still wore her most recent clothing, breeches with a maroon shirt covered by a leather jerkin. Her socks and boots were on the floor, and she reached for them while Wilbur went to the other end of the bed and sat. Once Holly made her way to the room's closed door, she pressed an ear against the cool surface. Hearing nothing, she took a deep breath, opened it, and peered through. The hallway outside was deserted. Taking slow steps, Holly left Wilbur behind as she made her way down the bare-walled hall to a spiraling staircase leading down to the foyer. Holly expected to see Gracilla pop her head out in front of her at any moment as she descended the steps, but no one, not even one of her other housemates, materialized. Once she reached the last step, Holly performed a cursory inspection of the ground floor. The playroom, the kitchen, the dining area, all were empty. Not knowing what else to do, Holly went to the front door and walked outside. The orphanage was located in an older section of Celia. There was crime and seedy individuals Holly had learned to avoid, but it was a community where most people looked out for one another. The comforts were not great. Everyone wanted for something. But the basic necessities were taken care of as long as one worked hard and stayed out of trouble. For Holly, working hard and avoiding trouble became a sort of mantra. Those times she strayed from either tenet, Gracilla had always been there to keep her on the straight and narrow. "Mind yourself," the portly woman with the gray and black hair used to say to her. "Stop for no one you don't already know, and be home before dark." Most of the time, the warnings were unnecessary, for Holly became street smart early on. She had to. It was either that or end up like her one-time roommates. Holly looked across the unusually empty street toward Hannock's butcher shop. The slaughter of the day usually hung in the windows, ready to be taken down and portioned out to the shop's many patrons. The display was bare now, though, and no one jostled for entry. It was the same to either side. Shops, pubs, and other dwellings showed no life, and all was quiet. This was Celia, though. She was sure of it. Strange that in a city boasting a population in the tens of thousands, she found herself alone. Alone. She hated the word. It sounded so final, so dismal. As a small girl of 7, she'd been left alone by parents who had no use for her. By the time she was 8 and safely living under Gracilla's watchful eye, she made a vow to never find herself alone again. Yet now, despite all her efforts to the contrary, here she was, alone. "You are not alone." Holly froze. The voice had come from all around her. She looked in all directions but did not see the speaker. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Holly took cautious steps out onto the cobbled street. In many places, the road had fallen into disrepair, and she was careful not to step into a crevice or trip on a chipped stone. A cool breeze blew through her hair. "Is someone there?" she asked again, this time louder. "I know someone is here." Holly started walking down the avenue. "Show yourself, if you so desire." Startled by the voice, behind her this time, Holly spun around to face its owner. Somehow she managed to wedge her foot between 2 rutted stones and, unbalanced, she fell. Her gaze remained glued to the figure all the way down. Wrapped from head to toe in gray robes, the person was marked by long arms and legs and a thin frame. Arms joined together at the hands were lost within the folds of the sleeves, and the cowl concealed his or her features in shadow. The most remarkable aspect of the figure was also the strangest, for Holly saw right through the figure as if it weren't there. The realization caught the breath in her throat as she felt her skin go cold. There was a moment of shocked inaction before Holly regained control of her faculties. Struggling to rise, she tried to free her foot, but it was caught fast, the attempt proving futile as she fell back to the street. Fighting to remain calm, she focused her full attention on her trapped foot. Even with both hands on her leg, she still failed to pry it free. Then she heard the soft rustle of robes and she knew the apparition came for her. Frantic, Holly renewed her efforts, memories of another robed figure filling her mind. She had to concentrate. The looming figure was closer now. She had to free herself. Holly gathered all of her strength in one last effort, heaving all her weight backward, but still her foot remained wedged in place. Then the robed figure was over her, reaching for her. Holly shrank from it, scrunching herself against the street and covering her face with her arms. Clenching her teeth, she surrendered herself to whatever happened. She felt a touch, a physical touch, on her ankle. Her first reaction was to kick out, but the contact was gentle and non-threatening. It settled on her boot. Then, with a quick jerk, she was free of the rut. Holly peered through squinted lids at the cowled phantom. A ghostly hand, a man's hand, whose skin glowed pink and soft, patted her foot several times as if to indicate all was well. The man then stood and offered the same hand to help her rise. Holly hesitated. His features remained concealed, but, ghostliness aside, he did not seem quite so imposing now as he had at first sight. Studying his outstretched hand, she saw fingers long and delicate, with neatly trimmed nails. Reluctance gave way under the man's non-threatening posture, and Holly extended her own hand to his. A surprisingly firm grip took hold of her, pulling her up from the cobbled street. This close, Holly saw the man's translucent gray robes were of a fine material akin to silk. Despite the obvious richness, they were quite plain, bearing no markings of any kind. He was only slightly taller than she, and even slighter of form than she had initially thought. "My apologies for frightening you." Panic must have made the voice seem hard and threatening, for now it was soft, inviting, and tinged with an accent the like of which she had never heard before. When he spoke again, Holly realized she was not hearing the words so much as sensing them in her mind. "You have no need to fear me." "So you say." The fact that she was still alive lent Holly newfound courage. "I've not had the best luck of late with those who conceal their features beneath hoods." A chuckle resounded in her mind. "You speak of the witch?" Holly's voice betrayed her surprise. "You know of her?" "Yes." "Do you serve her?" Holly narrowed her gaze, waiting for the apparition's reply. Flight remained foremost in her mind. "No," he answered, distaste plain in his voice. Holly believed him, inasmuch as she dared. Though questions remained, she wondered if herein might lie an ally. She resigned to tread carefully for now. "Does she know about you?" The cowled stranger weighed the question. "No. If she did, either subjugation or destruction awaits me. Finding neither choice appealing, I have kept myself hidden from her." "Who are you then? Will you at least show me your face?" Another pause, this time out of hesitation, Holly felt. He did answer, though. "You may find the sight of me unsettling. Why not let me judge for myself?" The shoulders of the figure rose and fell in a shrug. Then both hands rose to the cowl and drew it from his head. A face, translucent and ghostly, which might have been handsome at one time, was pockmarked with jagged scars, oozing welts, and deep pits. The dark pink wounds were etched with red. The small sections of skin not affected by such maladies were dry and flecked with bits of flaking skin. His head was hairless, his nose a sharp point, and his eyes gray like steel. Swollen lips bearing the same scars as his face were like bloated slugs arranged one on top of the other. Holly, unable to view the horrible sight even a moment longer, looked away. When she ventured a glance back at the apparition, she saw he had concealed his features once more. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "Your repugnance is warranted and understood." No, it isn't. I'm sorry." The man stood motionless, offering nothing. Who are you? What is your name? My name is Parthen. Once, long ago, I was priest to a god whose name has no doubt been lost to history. A god? There were no gods left to serve. Many of the immortals' names have been forgotten. They died, destroyed themselves, over 500 years ago. Yes, I know. Which immortal did you serve? Holly asked, reservation in her voice. The apparition answered without hesitation. Simmaron Grave. Holly felt what color remaining in her face drain away, for she knew the name well. Many were the tales which told of the god of disease, called by his followers the Lord of Rot. Most people believed the stories mere fables, tales told to frighten disobedient children. The old gods, as they came to be known, had died a long time ago. Other people, though, believed the tales were more than just stories. Holly was one of them. She backed away from the ghostly priest. Simmaron Grave? It was said the mere touch of the disease-lord zealots infected a person with sickness so deadly their victims threw themselves on their swords rather than wait for the horrible symptoms to reveal themselves. Holly looked in horror at her own hand, where she had allowed herself to be touched. It looked no different than before, but somehow it felt wrong. I told you, you have nothing to fear from me. I don't understand. How can you say that if you truly serve? Panic threatened to smother her as she looked about for some escape. There was only the empty city. What is this place? Her voice shook and her knees suddenly felt weak. You know where we are. She did, as impossible as it still seemed. How can this be? I was in the cave, in chains. Where you yet remain. This place is of the mind, a sort of limbo lying somewhere between the waking world and the world of dreams and nightmares. What you see around you is but illusion, a familiar image I found and pulled from your mind. Parthen's head went from one side to the other. A rather undistinguished place, but one I felt might be of comfort to you while we talked. Holly blanched. Pulled from my mind? The thought both confused and sickened her. What do you want from me? The feebleness in her legs became too much, and she fell to the ground, sobbing. She felt the priest's presence draw near. She recoiled from it. Don't touch me, she lashed out, but Parthen had not moved that close. My touch has not harmed you. You lie. I have no reason to lie, especially regarding this. Then what do you want? I wish to make a trade. A trade? The words cut through the panic in her mind. They were not what she had expected to hear, and the notion somehow brought reason back to her. A trade for what? Holly inspected her person through teary eyes. Except for her clothes, she possessed nothing. Not even her mandolin, which was smashed and worthless now anyway. What do I have which could possibly be of value to you? There is nothing you possess which I want, but there is something you can do for me. I, in turn, am willing to do something for you. Still holding the hand that had touched the priest close to her chest, Holly pushed herself from the ground so she stood squarely before him. Fighting to control her trembling, she forced her mind to remain focused. There is nothing you can say or do to make me want to help you. I'm sorry. Parthen replied without hesitation, as if he had anticipated such a reply. That is unfortunate, for even now events unfold which neither of us can control. A chance remains whereby we may yet effect a solution to our mutual problems, though. You may have problems, priest, but I have none. Parthen laughed. You lie chained to an ancient pool of corruption and evil, the prisoner of a witch who will soon empty the blood from your body, and you have no troubles? He laughed again. Your friends. What do you know of my friends? Holly asked. Only that they will soon be on their way to the temple where we are both held as prisoners. You mean the chamber where the witch brought me? They're coming for me? Hope sprang up. If my friends come to save me, what need do I have for bargains with you? Temper your bravado. If they fail, they doom many more than just yourself. I offer you insurance against that failure. How so? Can you help them defeat the witch? I can. And what do you ask in return? Freedom. For 500 years I have been trapped within the cavern of my god, bound to the well of rot. Even outside this illusionary world I exist as you see me now, for my corporeal form was stripped from me long ago. 500 years? Fathoming such a span was not possible for her right now. A part of her suddenly felt sorry for the priest, living for so long as a mere shade. But she reminded herself of who and what he was. Shaking her head as she said, I will never help free you. Whoever imprisoned you must have had a very good reason for doing so. I can only imagine what heinous deeds you committed to deserve such a fate. But I cannot help but think it justified. Freedom for me is not what you might think. Long ago, as punishment for the heinous deeds you refer to, my jailers chained my spirit to the instrument of what should have been my greatest triumph. They left me a shade, unable to influence the conscious world around me in any way. They meant for me to exist like this for all eternity, always remembering what I'd taken part in and knowing, in the end, it had all been undone. Holly just shook her head again. I'm sorry you have been trapped in that awful place for so long, but I won't help release you from it. She meant it too. When the time is nigh, you may have a change of heart. When your friends' lives, hang in the balance, you may think twice about spurning my offer. For now, think on it. Fate moves inexorably onward, and we need only wait for all those things we have no control over to come to fruition. Holly watched Parthen's robed form shimmer, then fade, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the avenue. Moving to a bench situated in front of Barbadon's deserted pub, she sat there for a time, thinking. Parthen had said the others were coming for her. She hesitated to believe anything he said, though. His claim concerning his origin was fantastic. A dark priest from a long-past age, kept alive as punishment for… what? It was all too much for her to digest, and Holly found herself wishing one of the others were present to help her. There was no help, though. Whatever she decided, whatever she did, she was on her own. Somewhere through the silence of the illusionary city, she thought she heard laughter. Whether witch or priest, Holly didn't know. Still, it rang on in her mind. Chapter 16. The Coming of Evil. There is much to tell, Elias Darbo said. So much, I know not where to start. Muric, Kara, and Jerrick sat in a half-circle before the half-dryad, the whole of their attention riveted upon the emerald-haired woman. Next to Jerrick lay Ash, whose own interest fixed on the procession of birds descending to the gurgling stream. Opposite Ash, at Jerrick's other side, slept Avar. The elder tossed and turned every so often, but remained quiet otherwise. Somewhere overhead, Sonar perched amidst the tangled branches, an occasional hoot the only evidence of his presence. The beginning, Muric said, offering encouragement, is always a good place. Elia took a deep breath, then said, I spoke before of a witch. It is she who is the catalyst of the evil come to these woods. The catalyst, but not the source. The others looked at one another with curious expressions, saying nothing as they waited for the half-dryad to explain. Like you, my arrival to the Simmaron was only recent. It took little time for me to realize something was wrong, and so I traveled with all haste to Solenkel. My arrival was too late, but for the trees, I was alone. It is their counsel I sought first. She paused for a moment, surveying the faces before her. She stopped at Kara's. I see the disbelief in your eyes, knight. The notion may no doubt be strange to you, but know that the trees, all trees, not just those surrounding us now, are as much alive as you or I. They think, they speak in their own fashion, they possess their own wants and desires, though these are for simple things like fertile soil, sunshine, and rain. They may stand in silence, Alaya said, as her gaze strayed to the great trees around them. But they sense everything. Kara, who had shed her armor and now wore only the thick, padded gambeson beneath, leaned in closer, intrigued. What did they tell you? They told me how months, or perhaps years ago, time has such different meaning to them. A stranger entered the forest. They knew not whence she had come, nor on what business. But these are not the concerns of trees, and so they troubled themselves little more over it. If only they had been as vigilant as some others, she said, her gaze fixing on Jerrick for a moment before straying to Ivar, where it lingered the longest. Perhaps this nefarious business might have been stopped before it ever truly started. Jerrick didn't like the implication in the woman's stare, especially as she continued to gaze at Ivar, but he said nothing. Alaya finally looked away and went on. It remains unknown to me even now why the patrollers did not immediately see this woman, this witch, for who and what she was. Whatever the reason, she was allowed to roam the forest unmolested, free to work her evil as she saw fit. The trees and the dryads felt that evil first. It was so subtle, so difficult to ascertain its true nature, that when they finally recognized it for what it was far too late. You speak of the decay afflicting the forest, Murik said. Alaya nodded. None of them, dryad or tree, understood how soil they had drawn life from for so long suddenly proved anathema to them. Unlike myself, those of my family whose blood runs pure are bound to the trees of Solin Kell, and so they investigated from within its boundaries only, trying to determine the cause of the malady, even as they drew life and death from the tainted earth. By the time they understood what the witch was about, they were too weak to stop her. In the end, they sacrificed themselves, returning their life force unto this grove so its vitality might continue to provide refuge to the creatures surrounding us now. The trees told me all of this, and more. Deep in the forest, they said, is a place the witch frequents with growing regularity. The exact details of the place remain unknown to them, for no life, no other trees, exist there to relay information. But it has borders, where life ends and darkness rules. And so I asked the trees to show me the way. In my grief and anger, I thought to confront the witch, to make her undo all she had done. It was foolishness which guided me, for I was as ignorant of her power as I was her plans. Now I am ignorant of neither. There was a glimmer of purpose in the woman's eyes. I get ahead of myself, for you must hear the tale as it unfolded in order to make proper sense of it all. The directions given to me by the trees guided me well, and I reached this secret place of the witches without hindrance. It was a place of darkness, a gaping rent in the earth. I almost turned and fled at the sight of it, for it exuded a sense of corruption and decay, the like of which I had never experienced before. It was difficult entering the place. The dryad in me so loves the sky and sun and moon that descending into that pit. Jerrick saw goosebumps on the woman's arms and neck, despite the warmth of the grove. I made myself go on, though. There was a long passage, and then a cavernous room where unlit torches lined a path leading deeper into the chamber. I followed the line of the torches through the half-dark to a dais elevated high above the floor. I saw several large obelisks. There were 4 in all, at the top. They were manlike and swathed in robes of stone. Each held hands outward, toward something at their center. The urge to flee was stronger than ever now, but I had come too far to turn back. I had to see with my own eyes what lay between the statues. Though every step was a struggle, I reached the top of the dais. There I saw a wide pool brimming with black liquid that seethed and boiled. Looking at its surface, waves of nausea permeated my being, and my inner voice screamed at me to flee. My faculties must have left me then, for I only vaguely remember running from the cave and back into the forest. I did not truly regain my senses until the Hall of the Wood hove into view. I thought to find safety there. The notion fled the moment I realized the patrollers had deserted it. "What about the patrollers?" Jerrick asked. "What happened? I mean, how did they become—" Jerrick looked upon Ivar, his condition increasingly better with each passing moment. It was a shocking change from the beast of only last night. "How did they become those monsters?" "The details of their story remain unknown to me," Elia answered. "But it seems clear they must have fallen under some spell of the witches. I first encountered them the night I spoke to you through the Grove stream. I don't know if the witch sent them after me or if they acted of their own volition. The trees gave them such a thrashing they dare not enter Solenkel again." Satisfaction in the form of a smile played out across Elia's face. I knew not who or what they were. It was only later, after I'd visited the hall and found it empty, that I guessed at their true identity. For in all my years in the Simmaron, never before had I seen such creatures. The witch wanted the patrollers out of the way, because as her machinations progressed, the ill effects became more and more widespread and recognizable. She knew if the patrollers were left unchecked, they would try to stop her, and so she changed them, making them into her slaves. "Are you saying they serve her?" Jerrick asked. "In mind and body, though I doubt in spirit." Silence pervaded the group then, as each lost themselves in their own thoughts. Murik, who appeared the least phased of all of them, was the first to start the conversation up again. "What of this cave you visited?" he asked. "What can you tell us of the pool and the statues surrounding it?" "The pool is a well of darkness," Elia said. "A well?" Murik said, astonishment in his voice. He paused, lowering his head as he rubbed his forehead. He looked up sharply. "There have been no wells in existence for over some 500 or 600 years, Elia said. "The statues are guardians, safekeepers erected long ago by the ancient druids of the Simmaron." Jerrick straightened. "The druids?" He looked at Murik and Kyra, seeing the confusion in their expressions, and so he explained. "It's said the druids protected the Simmaron long ago, though no one has seen or heard from them in so long. Many think their existence myth." "Myth or not," Elia said, "it was one of their order, an archdruid named Delbin Kincaid, who told me how to stop the witch and undo all she has done." Murik shifted his staff in his lap. His brow narrowed as his gaze fixed on Elia. "I know of Delbin," he said, his voice slow and measured. "I also know he died a long time ago. How, may I ask, were you able to communicate with him?" Elia answered without hesitation. "With this." She reached beneath her cloak, revealing a fist-sized gem, whose deep cerulean facets glimmered in the morning sun. "Murik," Jerrick said, looking from the stone to the sorcerer and then back again. "It looks just like yours." Jerrick had never said anything, but he'd seen a similar medallion hanging from the sorcerer's neck on more than one occasion. Now Murik pulled the medallion out from beneath his shirt. The stone at its center was the twin of the one held by the half-dryad. "Elia," the Esler sorcerer asked, "from where does that stone come?" "From Solenkel. Long has it been kept safe by my family. It is said to have been given unto our ancestors by the druids themselves, in the event their aid was ever needed." Murik weighed the information. "Tell me what you did with it." Elia hesitated, but only for a moment. Something in the wizard's tone demanded she speak, and quickly. "I took it to Delbin Kincaid's tomb. It is a secret place known only to me now. There, I used the stone's power to summon the archdruid back from the dead. No one said anything right away, as all eyes fixed upon Eliah's medallion. What you hold in your hand, the sorcerer said, is a soul stone. Delbin's tomb must have contained some residual energies or some other mechanism which aided in the summoning process, for it is highly unlikely you accomplished the feat otherwise. Contrary to what you may believe, the stone was not the instrument which allowed you to summon the archdruid spirit back from the dead. Rather, the stone is the vessel which contains his spirit. Though Eliah's grip relaxed, she did not let the soul stone go. Murik went on. Summoning the dead is never without a price. What, I wonder, was Delbin's? The half-dryad was so enraptured, staring at the amulet in her hand, it seemed at first she had not heard the wizard's words. But then she snapped out of her daze and said, "There are no debts between us." Whatever price Delbin had demanded, Eliah had already paid it. Murik studied the woman a moment longer before he said, "Tell us what the archdruid said." Delbin told me of the well of darkness. Eliah's gaze strayed back and forth, encompassing them all. The well was created ages ago by zealots of an old god whose name the archdruid refused to speak. These dark priests thought to use the power of the well to destroy all life. If not for the druids, they might have succeeded. The druids slew these violators of the earth, then created and enchanted the 4 sentinels I saw in the underground chamber. Delbin called them druid wards. Then, they sealed off the cavern, it having remained so until the witch somehow discovered it. She negated the wards, whose purpose was to inhibit the power of the well, and thereby unleashed its evil. This is what I meant when I first began. She is the catalyst, but not the source of the Simmaron's woes, for it is the well which poisons the forest by tainting the very earth beneath us. Eliah fell into silence. No one said anything for several minutes. Then, one by one, they turned their gazes to Murik. The sorcerer saw their stares, knowing they did not truly look at him, but at the medallion hanging from his neck. "This, also, is a soul stone," he said. "Much like the one Eliah holds, it contains the spirit of someone long dead. In this case," he said, fingering the edge of the medallion, "the spirit of my former master, Ushar, who has dwelt within it for some 30-odd years." He let the amulet fall to his chest. "I told Jerrick when we started this journey I sought a friend. That is not entirely true. I do, in fact, seek someone, but she is no friend. Rather, she is the very same witch who has unleashed the power of the well upon the Simmaron. Her name I will not speak, but for 30 years I have hunted her, following in her steps. Such is her guile that only once have we met in battle." He tapped one end of his staff against his crippled leg. "This is a remembrance of that encounter. It is a testament to her cunning that she has stayed ahead of me for this long. Now, however, she will not flee, not so long as the power of the well entices her." Murik paused as his gaze met each of theirs. "I have kept this knowledge from you with only the best intentions in mind. My life, my purpose, has been dedicated to her demise for a long time. It is a road I have learned to walk alone." "How much of what Eliah told us did you already know?" It was the first question which came to Jerrick's mind. "I learned of that information here and now, just as you did. The only thing I have been certain of is my enemy's involvement, though that certainty came only as we reached Homewood and later neared the hall." "If you've known of the witch's presence," Kara said, "why not just tell us?" "It was my hope to prevent your involvement, but it is clear the threat has become too far-reaching and grave for that." "Even still," Kara said, anger rising within her, "you should have told us." "If I had, would it have changed anything?" "Yes, it might have. For one, Holly might still be with us." Murik sighed. You are right, of course. The Eslar's frank acknowledgement took Jerrick, who found his own anger building by surprise. Kara must have felt the same, for her posture relaxed, and she remained quiet as they both waited for the sorcerer to continue. Alaya said nothing, though she followed the exchange with interest. For not telling you, Murik said. I am sorry. I miscalculated, and Holly's abduction was the price. Jerrick heard a rustling next to him, and a soft, raspy voice rose so it was just audible over the other sounds of the grove. If any of you seek someone to blame, blame me, for it is I alone who am responsible. Jerrick moved to help his old friend. Ivar tried to sit up, but immediately started to fall back until Jerrick provided an arm for support. The cloak concealing the old man's naked body fell to his waist, allowing all to see the curing effect of Solon Kell. The yellow pallor was completely gone, his eyes sane once more. Jerrick offered Ivar his water skin. The elder drank in great gulps, as if water had not touched his lips in days. With his thirst slaked, he leaned back against one of the grove's trees. How are you, old friend? Jerrick asked. Tired, but well. Thanks to all of you. Though his eyes swept over all of them, they lingered the longest on his fellow patroller. How much do you remember? Jerrick asked. Evar took another pull from the water skin. There are images and feelings. He shook his head. But nothing concrete. The last thing I truly remember is being at the hall. Alaya moved, so she stood over Ivar. Tell us, Elder, what did you mean a moment ago when you spoke of blame? Jerrick glanced sidelong at her, seeing the suspicion written upon her face. Alaya, the patroller said. He doesn't know anything about... Evar held up a weary hand. It's all right, Jerrick. I fear I know more than you think. Tell us, Alaya demanded. Jerrick was about to remind Alaya that one did not demand anything from an elder of the hall when a sigh escaped Ivar's lips, and he spoke. Deep in the forest, he said, his voice old and weary, and nothing like Jerrick remembered it. There is a cave. Yes, I know of it, Alaya said, as well as what lies inside. Do you know how the witch found it? Ivar took another sip of water. She found it because I told her where it was. Seconds passed, seconds used to absorb the old man's words. You told her where it was. Alaya spoke with little emotion. The quiver in the line of her jaw, the balling of her fists, and her glare spoke differently. Why do such a thing? The color of her cheeks deepened. I did it, the elder said, his voice a whisper. I did it to save my wife. The answer caught Alaya off guard. It seemed the tension building in her lessened, at least for the moment. Several years ago, my wife grew deathly ill. The hall's alchemists and physicians tried everything, but still they had no answers. At that time, we had been together for near 40 years. A long time, to be sure, but not nearly long enough. I thought I was doing the right thing by seeking out the witch's help. She'd only been in the forest a short while, and we all thought her harmless, as so many of these woodswomen usually are. She promised a potion to cure my wife's illness if only I provided something of value in return. I offered her every worldly possession at my disposal, even going so far as to offer myself as her servant. I was so desperate, I even thought to kill her and simply take the potion, but I feared bringing down a curse upon my beloved. Finally, I told the witch of the cave. I discovered the place by chance when I was a boy. On that day, I traveled farther than I ever had before. For a week of heavy rainfall had kept us cooped up far too long, and I was eager to venture out. I wasn't really paying attention to where I was going until I saw it. The rainfall had caused a mudslide, revealing the cave's entrance. I immediately felt something wrong about the place, but my curiosity got the best of me. Oh, when I entered and laid eyes on the well, I knew instantly it was something terrible, So I returned to the surface and made sure no one found the place ever again. The cave remained undisturbed until I told the witch of it. Ivar's shoulders slumped and he looked down, unable to meet any of their gazes. I thought I had insured against the witch using the temple's secrets, but I was wrong. For that, and for all of it, I am sorry. You're sorry? Elia was worked into a fury. You brought this down on us. Elia, Jerrick started to say. You slew my mother. Elia, as surely as if you held the knife yourself. Ivar looked up, meeting Elia's rage. His eyes were moist with tears. Elia, that's not fair, Jerrick said. Wasn't it? Jerrick's own thoughts did not agree with his words. How could Ivar have done this? He had single-handedly doomed every one of the patrollers. I made her swear an oath, the elder said, his voice a whisper. A witch's oath, not to use the well against the hall or the people of the Simmaron. A witch's oath is supposed to be unbreakable, is it not? He looked at each of them, desperate for confirmation. It is true, but only partially, Murik said. A witch's oath is a powerful binding. Under ordinary circumstances, breaking such a bond is folly, the consequences dire. Under ordinary circumstances, Kara said? What about under extraordinary ones? Arrogance can be a powerful force, Murik said. If the witch has willingly broken her oath to the elder, then she has grown arrogant indeed. Ivar sank back. There was nothing left for him to say as his hands rose to cover his bowed head. Jerrick fought to contain the emotions stirring within him as he looked upon the man who had been, in many ways, a father to him. As Ivar's brief admission had unfolded, Jerrick felt anger. Ivar had condemned every living thing in the Simmaron, and possibly beyond. But now, seeing the once proud man clothed in nothing but Jerrick's own cloak, his frame gone gaunt and his mind only recently elevated back from the stature of an animal's, Jerrick found his anger slipping away. Ivar was as much a victim as anyone, for Jerrick had no doubts this witch had manipulated and taken advantage of the elder's desperation. Ivar had made mistakes, horrible mistakes, but Jerrick knew he'd have acted no different were their roles reversed. Jerrick placed a hand on Ivar's shoulder. The old man looked up, meeting Jerrick's stare. Though no words were exchanged, Jerrick knew Ivar understood at least one person forgave him. What is the witch's plan, then? Kara asked. What does she hope to accomplish beyond sickening the forest? Both Jerrick and Kara looked at Murik, whose own gaze had gone to Elia. The half-dryad continued to stare at the elder, stewing, oblivious to the question or the stares cast her way. Kara asked her question again, this time gaining the woman's attention. Elia tore her gaze from Ivar, but only with reluctance. Not even Delbin Kincaid knew the full extent of the witch's plans. He did, however, tell me this much. Tonight, when the full moon reaches its apex and the stars align in just such a way, her power will be at its greatest. She has also spent much time of late traveling the forest and even beyond, gathering all manner of strange herbs and such. And she has an innocent, Murik added. When the Eslar saw the others looking at him in confusion, he explained, She has all the ingredients for a spell. A powerful one, no doubt. What does all of that mean for Holly? Kara asked. What will this witch do to her? I'm afraid that remains unknown, Murik said, though I doubt the end result will be pleasant. Kara stood. Then our course of action is clear. We must slay the witch and save Holly. No, Elia said, facing the night. It is the well of darkness which must be dealt with first. If left unchecked, if we do not restore the Druid wards, the Simmaron woods and its people are doomed. Be that as it may, Kara said. I think my friend's life deserves... Elia is right, but so are you, Kara, Murik said as he also stood. It is your task to restore the druid wards. It falls upon me to deal with the witch. We shall have to split up. There was no immediate reaction from the others. Jerrick didn't like the idea, though, and he gave voice to his concern. How do we even know the two objectives lie at different locations? I know, Murik said, offering nothing more. Kara shifted her weight from one side to another, then said, I do not like this either. We are stronger together. Murik had just opened his mouth to speak when she quickly added, But I bow to your greater wisdom, sorcerer. Your quest to defeat this witch is both admirable and noble. Murik acknowledged the knight's words with a slight bow. Jerrick rose. I think it is foolish for you to go ahead on your own, Murik. At least allow me to join you. Your gesture is appreciated, Jerrick. But this contest between me and the witch shall pit sorcery against witchcraft. Conventional warfare and weapons will have no place there. Jerrick opened his mouth to continue his argument, but then checked himself. He still didn't like the idea, but he also realized Murik's knowledge on this subject was the greater. Also, despite having withheld information from them, Jerrick trusted the sorcerer. The fact he had stayed with them this far said something. Only one thing remains to be determined, Kara said. How do we restore the druid wards? Alaya held out her hand. With these. Gone was Delbin Kincaid's soulstone. In its place lay 4 gleaming emeralds, their color a perfect match with the half-dryad's hair and eyes. They are the gemstones of Moran, given to me by Delbin Kincaid. They contain the necessary enchantment to restore the power of the druid wards, and thereby contain the well's evil once more. We must travel to the cave and give one unto each of the 4 sentinels. Only then will the decay of the Simmaron be halted. Quick words of agreement and nods of approval were exchanged, and then there was no further need for talk. Murik wasted no time, readying himself in minutes. One by one, the others offered their well wishes to him. Alaya's consisted of a simple nod. Kara voiced a curt, good luck. Only Jerrick's farewell lasted longer. Are you sure about this? He asked. Ash stood next to the patroller, his gaze fixed expectantly upon the sorcerer. Murik reached out and rubbed behind his ears. Yes, I am sure, the sorcerer said. But what if you do not succeed? All the more reason for us to split up. At best, I will stop the witch. At worst, she will survive. But by the time she reaches the cave, you will have already restored the druid wards. Jerrick met Murik's stare. You told Alaya the dead do not give up their secrets without a price. Jerrick gestured toward Murik's amulet, which still hung outside his shirt. What price have you paid? Murik let the question hang unanswered between them. This is farewell, then, Jerrick finally said. Murik chuckled. When first we met, I sensed your reluctance in having me join you. Your sentiments seem to have changed. Jerrick smiled. I suppose they have. He glanced at Ivar, who remained quietly lost in his own painful memories. A teacher of mine taught me a long time ago that one does not abandon a friend. Jerrick extended a hand to the Eslar. Good luck, Murik. And to you also? With a flourish of his cloak, Murik turned and disappeared into the woods. Jerrick stared after him for a time before he returned to the others. They'd a task of their own. You've reached the end of the second part of this adventure. If you're enjoying this story, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel to get a notification when the next story is available. The Hall of the Wood will conclude in Part 3.